Can I welcome everyone to the Police and Crime Committee meeting? This morning we'll be holding our monthly question and answer session with the Mayor's Office for Police and Crime and the Metropolitan Police Service. Please make sure that your electronic devices are switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. Can I now ask our clerk, Lauren Harvey, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendation set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare?
Noted.
Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of January 2026 to be signed by me as a correct record?
Agreed.
Can we note the completed and ongoing actions arising from previous meetings of the committee?
Noted.
Can we note the recent action taken by me as Chair under delegated authority following consultation with party group lead members to agree the committee's report, Neighbourhood Policing, the Experience of Young Londoners?
Noted.
We now move on to our main item of business, and I'd like to welcome our guests, Kaya Comer-Schwartz, the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and Assistant Commissioner Matt Twist, KPM, Frontline Policing, and Assistant Commissioner at the Metropolitan Police Service. Thank you, and lovely to see you both. So, our first question I will start with, and the section is about operational oversight of the Met. Question to both. Oh, I'm so sorry. I understand that, Assistant Commissioner, you have an opening statement for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, Chair, thank you very much, and Assembly members, good morning. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to make a few opening remarks before we turn to questions. I thought this moment, as we come towards the end of this financial year, was a useful time to just take stock ahead of the sort of main Q&A session, and also to look forward a bit to the coming year. This year, the Met has seen improving performance and more positive outcomes for Londoners. In January, we reflected that 2025 saw the lowest homicide rate per capita since records began in 1996, and the lowest total homicide figures in 11 years. For a city of 9 million people as complex as London, this is a significant achievement. Violent crime in London is also down, and that's not just policing data that tells us this, it's NHS hospital admissions data showing the same trend. We've made significant progress on violence against women and girls. Charges for rape and serious sexual offences have more than tripled since 2020, and the rape-positive outcome rate is now consistently above 13%, which compares well nationally, up from around 4% 3 years ago. We know there's more work to do on neighbourhood crime, but our investment in neighbourhood teams and our focus on serious and organised crime, including phone theft and shoplifting, is starting to make a difference. Last autumn, we dismantled an organised crime group believed to be responsible for exporting 40,000 stolen phones out of the UK. That operation and others like it have contributed to a 15% reduction in phone theft and robbery in the year to date, compared to last year. To highlight just one example of our new community crime fighting approach, led by neighbourhood teams, earlier this month, a neighbourhood team in Merton made 23 arrests and seized 5 firearms, a samurai sword, 10 prohibited weapons, 2 high-powered Suron bikes and a substantial amount of cash. This is the neighbourhood policing that's delivering a real impact. We've delivered this progress while shrinking as an organisation. Around 1,700 posts have been removed in 25-26, taking the total reductions to roughly 3,300 over the 3 years. London is at its largest population ever, while the Met is at the smallest it's been for many years. Alongside these operational results, we continue the biggest clean-up in the Met's history. Around 1,500 officers and staff have been removed from the organisation. Internal reporting of wrongdoing has tripled since 21-22 as more people are confident that action will be taken. And our vetting refusal rate has doubled to 11%. And I know the committee wants to explore more on this later. To close the £260 million budget gap this year, we've had to deliver several tough choices, including closing several front counters and reducing hours of others, saving more than £7 million annually. And I recognise some of these decisions have not been popular, including with Assembly members, but they've been necessary given the financial environment we face and the changing nature of crime. In December, we published our first estate strategy in a decade, setting out plans to 2035, and members will be aware that the Met receives no capital funding and that all estate spending must therefore come from the same budget as our other areas of work. As a result, we face a £1.7 billion capital gap and a £56 million annual revenue shortfall, which means we cannot deliver everything we would like within the estate strategy. So for now, our focus is on keeping our buildings legally compliant. We remain realistically ambitious, though, including a target of delivering 40 new neighbourhood policing hubs over the next 3 years, building on the success of the Woodford hub in Redbridge, the Coodbrook hub in Greenwich, and the West End touchdown base. And I thank members who attended briefings on this before Christmas. Also in December, we launched the next phase of the new Met for London, our blueprint to deliver more trust, less crime and high standards. This followed extensive public consultation, including roadshows in all 32 boroughs, and I thank the Assembly members present for their engagement. 3 years on from the launch of New Met for London, we've made real progress, and that was reflected in what Londoners told us during these roadshows. 81% of Londoners say the Met is doing a good or a fair job. 7 in 10 Londoners trust the police. There remains a gap in trust for some communities, but it is narrowing, including a 6% increase among black Londoners and a 7% increase among LGBTQ+ Londoners last year. This progress is particularly notable against a wider backdrop of declining trust in institutions. The 2026 Edelman Trust Barometer describes a world retreating towards insularity and lost trust in leaders across government, media and business. So as this year draws to a close, we can look back on an extremely demanding period, but one in which we've made necessary changes that put us in a stronger position to focus on the areas where we know we must go further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. Can I ask, could you bring the microphone a little bit closer to you, please? Thank you very much. I think we'll probably hear it a little bit better now. Thank you. So moving on to our questions, and the statement that you've given, a lot of the issues will be covered in the questions that we're asking. So be prepared. Rather than opening it out now, it makes more sense to do it that way. So to both of you, this section is about operational oversight of the Met. To both of you, what do you understand the legal basis of operational independence for the police to be? Assistant Commissioner, would you like to start?
I'm happy to. Thank you, Chair. So there's a core distinction between elected bodies setting priorities and budgets and chief officers taking operational decisions, such as those on investigations, arrests and tactics. Operational independence is a long-established constitutional principle that separates political oversight and strategy from day-to-day operational decision-making. The term isn't defined in a single statutory clause, but it is embedded in the common law and reflected in the governance framework set out by the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act of 2011. And I think, in simple terms, it sets out that elected bodies will set the strategic direction, the budget and broad priorities for policing. And in London, that role sits with the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime and MOPAC. But operational control, meaning day-to-day policing decisions, remains with the Commissioner and Chief Officers.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah. Similarly, I would only add that obviously there's 5 further definition within the Policing Protocol Order of 2023, where it states that the Mayor and I set the strategic objectives through the Police and Crime Plan and set the budget. MPS have operational independence, and which is obviously really important so that they can police London without fear or favour, and we hold them to account on their performance.
Thank you. Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. With regard to your opening statement, first of all, I think the loss of so many police officers is nothing short of scandalous, especially given the fact that the community in London is building. Regarding improving performance, first of all, can I congratulate you on the things that you've told us, but I particularly want to congratulate you on your female officer, who I think it was in Whitechapel, actually reminded people what the meaning of free speech is. I really would like to commend her, and I'd love to see more officers actually doing that. My official question, so thank you for that, and I hope you thank her on behalf of very many of us. In 2024, HMI recommended the Home Office should publish further guidance on the term operational policing. Would further guidance or definitions and boundaries of operating policing be helpful to you? and what impact would it have if you wanted it?
So, I mean, firstly, thank you for noting the great work of PC Moole, who was in Whitechapel. It's been reposted a number of times on differing social media accounts, and some more politicised than others. My view is it was a good example of officers showing policing common sense without fear or favour and doing a good job. So I'm grateful that the committee notices that. In terms of operational independence, I mean, I think there's sometimes a risk with adding more guidance into things, in that at the moment I think our view is pretty clear as to what that means, where the boundaries are, where the parameters are. Sometimes adding more regulation and guidance may not be that helpful, and could it unintentionally erode the operational independence of police leaders and police officers. It's critically important that policing decisions are never politicised, and I think that's the sort of key thing that we need to sort of underline. But I don't have a view on whether or not we should have more or less guidance. I think at the moment the position, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty clear.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Garbett.
Morning, both. To open up, to Deputy Mayor, how does MOPAC decide when it's appropriate to challenge or intervene in operational policing decisions while still respecting the independence as Assistant Commissioner has described?
Well, I'd say primarily in two ways. I think, first of all, obviously, you know, that MOPAC's work through its data and insight team and, for example, the public attitude survey that we conduct annually gives us a lot of insight into both crime statistics, but also insight from our commission services and Londoners on how they feel the performance is going. So through that data, we are able to bring forward challenge. You also know that we get, myself and the Mayor get regular operational updates, and those conversations that we have around that enable us to kind of have in the moment questions about what's happening around those operations. I think it's obviously a mix of challenge, but questioning, and where possible, both through the work of MOPAC and those conversations, supportive, critical, in a kind of critical friend mode of making sure that on behalf of Londoners, we're getting the policing that they deserve.
Thank you. So can you give an example of when that's happened in one of those meetings? Is this where the Commissioner meets with you and the Mayor? And you just described how sometimes there's some kind of challenge. Can you describe a operation or an event or an activity where you've done that sort of challenge?
Yeah, okay. So if I take, for example, the work around Operation Reckoning, which is the big organised crime work and work to enhance mobile phone theft arrests. I think we've been both supportive of that because of the work that the Met are doing to proactively analyse where those phones are going, both internationally and nationally, but also through the conversations that we have in MOPAC, we also know, because of the national data we hold, that the Met is kind of needs to go a long way. They're moving up the chart in terms of phone theft, but from a low base, and we push them to go further in that. And also, I know that this will be part of the discussions of this week. What can the Mayor do in terms of financial support to push them to go even further?
And what about when there's instances where you hear around, like you just described, there's kind of surveys, or you hear around kind of use of force or like activities that haven't gone well, or there's public opinion? You know, I've raised concerns with you. Do you raise those sort of concerns in those meetings, like where there's kind of, you know, around kind of protest or, you know, other events that have happened in the city?
Yeah, so through I know we spoke a bit about this last time, but one of the changes that I've brought about since I've started in my role is having deep dive thematic oversight meetings. So we've both discussed public order and intrusive tactics in that to make sure, for example, the work that has happened around tasers which has had additional safeguards brought in. What is the learning of those safeguards and how can they be expanded to other intrusive tactics? Similarly, on public order, questions that I've asked around how the police engage with people organising protests, and also the kind of community impact of some of that work and the follow-up and reassurance that happens as well.
Thank you. I just want to dig slightly into some of the term operational and how this is played out in some of the statements that the Mayor or the manifesto has made. So, for my understanding, obviously, the Mayor's made some statements around, say, the numbers of police officers that they're going to be. There's a statement in the manifesto around theft and robbery, which even includes the word operations. So I'll support the police in taking further action against perpetrators of burglary, theft and robberies, including focused operations across robbery hotspots using police vehicles, etc., etc. And also one on drugs. I'll continue to support the Met to take tough enforcement action. So, and I guess in your opening, Assistant Commissioner, you did talk about that kind of strategic direction versus the day-to-day policing, but can you see how some of those statements sound a bit muddied between those two?
So maybe I can help a little. As is set out in the protocol and the framework, the police have to have regard for the sort of police and crime plan. And within the police and crime plan, the PCC, or in this case the Mayor, will set out what the sort of priorities would be, and then we have to have regard for it. But what it's clear it doesn't say is we have to do it. We have to have due regard for it, and then sort of have the sort of accountability discussions that the Deputy Mayor has outlined. And I think there's a very robust oversight framework, actually, overall, which is set out in law, and the strategic oversight exercised by the Mayor and by MOPAC and the Office of the Deputy Mayor, also through this process and the wider London Policing Board. I mean, my teams are engaging with MOPAC and the Home Office colleagues multiple times a day on different issues, providing briefings, update, answering queries. In particular, ahead of major events, it's entirely legitimate that local politicians, including some Assembly members on occasion, will be briefed on things that we are doing, so there can be a public narrative from leaders, system leaders within London or nationally to outline some of the challenges that the police are facing. So we do have regular discussions, as the Deputy Mayor has outlined, and the Met, if we think that there's something that will be particularly contentious or hold a particular interest, then we will proactively brief it to the Deputy Mayor or to MOPAC, or if necessary to the Home Office, depending on what the actual thing is that we're discussing.
So in terms of what the Mayor says, or the strategic direction that the Mayor's setting, so the Mayor can say, I'm going to have X amount of officers, or here's some money to the Met for some officers, but the Commissioner could make the decision to not spend it on that and make a different operational decision. So say, here's X amount of money for X amount of PSPOs in this area, so the Mayor said that. The Met could be like, well, thank you, but we're actually going to spend that on something else.
So technically, yes, but it would be quite a damaging thing. I think there's
I'm trying to explore where the line is and how that conversation works, I guess.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, and what we're seeing more, both centrally, is sort of ring-fence money for specific things, and I think often that can be unhelpful because sometimes the ring-fence money isn't recurring. It can be, that doesn't help with our sort of overall workforce plan, which we're going to touch on later. But the Mayor will provide us with a budget, and we will then spend that budget making the best decisions we possibly can, and sometimes those decisions will need to change due to the operational circumstances in which we're faced.
Thank you. And just my last question, I guess sometimes in this committee, and I know other Assembly members have made this comment before, it sometimes feels like it's not operational when it's something that the Mayor's positive about. So say more, the phone theft situation that you described, saying, oh, you've done this, but can you do more? Yet sometimes the operational frame is used if we raise concerns about something, like I've often raised concerns about the way that policing of protest, it's called an operational decision. And I think that's sometimes, where this discussion has come from is that tension. Like if it's something good, we can congratulate them and we want them to do more. And if it's difficult, it's an operational decision.
I suppose my reflection on that statement would be that that's where we feel like the performance isn't where we want it to. That's where we're in our oversight mode, and that's where we robustly challenge both internally, use data the phone theft model, the example I gave, I'm saying, yes, we recognise that the Met have done some positive things in this area, but actually through our data, through the data we have, ONS data, we know that it's an ongoing concern for Londoners and it's at a real low base, so we're challenging them to go further. Similarly, through the work of the London Policing Board, we, in public, hold the Met to account on where we feel performance needs improving.
But I guess that's what I'm saying, because you're doing this well and I want you to do more of it is different to you've done this and can you do less? Do you ever say that? Do you ever say this tactic or this we don't like, can you do less of that, please?
So I wouldn't, I mean, I think this is the point around the operational independence. I don't think if, for example, let's use stop and search as an example. Here's a tactic that the police use. It is an operational tactic and they need to be able to do that without fear or favour from politicians. However, we also make sure that through the work and research that MOPAC has done, or the community engagement work we've done, or the conversations we've had around the Stop and Search Charter through the London Policing Board, that we're challenging the Met on the impact of that tactic and what more they might need to do or differently to improve the use of that tactic.
Thank you. I think I'll go back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, panel. Good to see you both. I think it's great to have this discussion because hopefully it will be helpful in getting a bit more clarity over this topic, because it's something that we've had raised in various contexts before. And I think following from Zoe's point, that I think members of the committee can be forgiven for sometimes thinking that when the Mayor uses the term operational independence, he's using it as a convenient excuse to hide from certain things. But I'd like to pick up in particular on that question over when things have not gone well, and what you're doing, Deputy Mayor, to hold that performance to account. And in particular, I'd like to refer to the previous exchange we had a couple of meetings ago about the protest at Miznon restaurant. Now, I asked for your sort of thoughts on that, and you gave a response which highlighted that public protest is an area where the MPS needs to have operational independence. Yes, we can agree with that. You talked about the constant difficult balance. Again, we understand that. I understand that. But at no stage in your reply to those questions did you give any indication that you thought that particular event or operation had gone wrong. And yet, subsequently, Deputy Assistant Commissioner James Harman did effectively issue an apology from the Met, and saying that it's clear that the planning arrangements and resources put into place that evening were not adequate. Our response wasn't good enough on this occasion. We recognise incidents like this create real fear within the Jewish community. So in the light of the fact that the Met themselves had apologised for the way that was handled, had you had a previous discussion since the PCC meeting where we had our exchange that led to that, or is that something that Deputy Assistant Commissioner Harman came out with on his own back?
I mean, AC Twist can give more detail in how public order operations are reviewed post-operation. I think that that's a standard practice, and it's welcome that the Met is reflecting on their practice. I think, as I've already stated, I wouldn't necessarily bring about issues about a particular public order. However, through the thematic work and oversight we do, we regularly challenge about how community impacts, especially given reflections we've had directly from CST, are affecting the Jewish community. The work previously that the Met has done around understanding the cumulative impact on public order to the Jewish community and the conditioning that has come about from that is part of that wider strategic work that is within my remit.
So is that saying, or are you saying that you didn't have a specific conversation about this specific incident?
When the protest happened, we obviously get operational updates, as I previously mentioned. We get accountability briefings. And as I previously mentioned, we question along those lines about what happened, our understanding. For example, I know that one arrest happened on the day. That's standard practice.
That sounds great in terms of a general approach, but I'm asking specifically, and I'm probably not getting an answer, but on this particular individual incident, did you have a conversation that then led to the Deputy Assistant Commissioner making that statement that he subsequently made?
Can I help? I don't know the details. I wasn't part of it, but the statement is a matter of record, and I think it's important to note, and the committee will see, that where we think we haven't got it right, we're open about that. And I think, James in his statement was clear that on that occasion we didn't get it right. And we've apologised for that, and we'll do better. I think it's also important that the committee is aware that, firstly, that we're open to that and we're open to challenge. And if anyone challenged us and felt that we didn't get it right, then we would listen to that and then review the circumstances that happened. But protest is really difficult, isn't it? In that we're operating in a time where the protest demand is greater than at any other point, certainly in my 30 years of service, where society is more polarised and divided, and where we have different pieces of legislation competing and butting up against each other in terms of different people's rights under the Human Rights Act, butting up against pieces of legislation under the Public Order Act that were designed in 1986. And may not be fit for the current sort of times, which is why a review is ongoing now, nationally, to look at this. I think the matter you referred to was a spontaneous protest, so there's a chronic demand. We're dealing now with thousands of protests every year, and wasn't one that was planned, which led to a response that we believe should have been better. And if we had our time again, it would be different, which is what James, I think, makes clear. We also know that the protest demand on the Met is a chronic abstraction for officers taken out of community policing. And we know that the National International Capital Cities grant is significantly underfunded for the amount of demand that we're now faced with, dealing with both the chronic and the acute protests that are sort of both those that are happening every single day, whether that's linked to Israel or Gaza or Iran or environmental causes or other things, as well as the very large protests that we see where obviously we have a lot more time, and again the Deputy Mayor and others would be briefed if we've got a significant protest of whatever character coming up at a weekend or any event, and we would brief as to what our plans were. And it's also worth noting, I think in the last 3 years, and it's just for context, in terms of the legal framework we do have, in the last 3 years we've used conditions and powers to a greater extent than at any other time, I believe, since the passing of the Act in 1986, to restrict, to balance the rights of those people who wish to protest against the rights of those people who you rightly mention who are impacted by it. So it's a really complex area.
Thank you for that, and I do appreciate it. And I certainly do very much welcome and appreciate the statement that was made. The only thing I would say is that given that today's discussion is one around or one of the elements about MOPAC holding the Met to account, it seems disappointing and perhaps regretful that when we had an opportunity to discuss with MOPAC at that previous meeting, that didn't seem to be a view that the Deputy Mayor was interested in expressing. But I'll leave it there, Chair, because I know we're conscious of time.
Thank you, Assembly Member. The final question in this section is from me, and then we have a number of members who want to follow up. And it's to both of you. Why is the closure of front counters in London considered an operational decision? Deputy Mayor.
Quite frankly, because it's about where officers are. So it's whether those officers are sitting behind those front counters or out on the street doing operations. And we have discussed many times at this committee that because of the £260 million gap of the last year, a number, 15 tough choices had to be taken. One of those is the decisions that were taken around front counters, which has brought a £7 million saving.
Thank you. Assistant Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, the Deputy Mayor's covered it. This is, and I've been to this committee, as sort of an exceptional plenary meeting on this point previously. The £260 million budget gap necessitated tough choices. These are tough choices, and we want to focus our money on protecting neighbourhood policing, response, public protection, investigations. In-person reporting has declined significantly over the last decade, with 95% of crime now reported online, on the phone or directly to officers, so not in the front counter. The revised model we do have, whilst it is smaller, and I accept that it's not popular with some, does still contain 27 front counters, maintains 2 of them 24 hours, with the others operating from 9 till 10 at night, and does include other mitigations so we can sort of respond to people as we need to. I think it is an operational decision because, as the Deputy Mayor outlines, this is a choice that we have. We either have fewer officers patrolling where they can sort of help everybody, or we have them sitting in front counters which are underused. And whilst it may provide a reassuring sort of sight that there's somebody sat there, a lot of the time, certainly overnight and other things, they're not doing anything, whereas actually there's huge demand. And the complexity of each unit of that demand is going up. So in a shrinking organisation where demand is increasing in terms of the amount of work that we need to do, and it's becoming more complex, it would be irresponsible, actually, to leave people underutilised sitting in front counters when they could be helping members of the public.
Thank you. Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, following on from what Marina has already asked, this question of front counters being an operational decision. In your introduction, or your answer to the first question, Matt, you talked about operational independence relating to investigations and arrests and day-to-day policing decisions, which I think everyone would agree is clearly within those parameters. Much of the sort of discussion and the guidance such that it exists is fairly vague, and yet at the previous meeting of this committee, when Kenny Bowe was here, he said something very precise, which was that MOPAC has oversight of asset disposal but not over building closures. And that seems a very precise definition, which I don't see where that's replicated elsewhere. So I'm wondering where that has come from.
So I think that's an accurate statement of the position, in that there's established case law that outlines that the Commissioner has very wide discretion in terms of how we deploy the resources that we have. MOPAC, as the Police and Crime Commissioner, owns the Met's building, so the Met, us, the officers, couldn't decide to sell it. But if we took an operational decision not to use a building, then we could make that decision on our own. So I suspect that's why Kenny made that distinction.
To the Deputy Mayor, I'm wondering, has this always been the view or the position around front counter closures? For example, when this Mayor made previous closures, was that the position that was taken then, that this is an operational matter? Or indeed, when the previous Mayor closed front counters and police stations, was this the stated position then? Or is it something that's only been reached as a position in relation to this current round of closures?
I think the main distinction between previous rounds of front closure counters and this one is the front closures with counter closures we're talking about at the moment are operational decisions, in that, as I've previously stated, they are officers not manning those counters. They are being put out into neighbourhood teams, whereas previous rounds of front counters have been closures of front counters have been more aligned with disposals from the estate, and therefore have that's why in previous rounds there has been joint consultations, because it is the duality of our responsibility as kind of landlord and the operational decisions around where those officers are sitting.
I'm sure there have been plenty of examples, though, in those previous rounds where buildings haven't been disposed of and yet front counters have been closed. I mean, in my borough, Barkingside, I think, would be an example of that. So I don't accept that that it can be one position 5 years ago and a different position now. Either it's that is the position or it's not. But I'm wondering, when was this view or this position reached? Was it before or after the last election?
Sorry, are you asking when the decisions around front counters...
When the position that any decision around front counter closures is an operational decision rather than a political one. Was that a position or a view that was reached before the election in 2024 or after the election in 2024?
The decisions around the budget, which is where this stems from, the list of 15 tough choices, was obviously after the election, because that's when we understood the government settlement and how big the gap, because of years of underfunding from previous governments, had got us, and therefore those operational decisions had to be made in light of the budget so that we could close the gap in that budget, so we could have a balanced budget.
No, that's in relation to those individual decisions on those individual stations. I get that, but the idea that in itself is purely an operational decision, if that was a position that was only reached after the election, well, when the mayor went to the city and in his manifesto made a very clear pledge of keeping those trunk counters open, was he being deceitful or disingenuous in putting forward something that he subsequently knew or previously knew wasn't actually a decision for him to be making?
Neither. He, at the time, in consultation with many stakeholders, wanted, like he still wants, to ensure priority access to the public to police officers. And what we heard very loudly through the police and crime consultation that we did, which had over 4,000 respondents, is what is really needed is visible neighbourhood policing, and we've prioritised that. However, at the time, before the election, there is no way that anyone, and that's like of national record, knew the size of the gap in budgets, that the national... I mean, it's been well debated. There's...
Assemblymember Roberts, you have your opportunity in a moment.
And therefore, when the budget settlement came in last year, and because of the underfunding of previous governments, because we knew we were facing a 260 million gap, we had to look at all ways in which we could close that. We have to remember that this decision is one of 15 decisions that were taken. When we got the £32 million of additional money, we looked to mitigate some of the impact of that, and also through the engagement process that the Met did after the first proposals, which MOPAC asked for IQAs, fed back on those. We have now seen, as AC Twist has mentioned, a situation where we now have 27 front counters open across the city.
I'll finish in a sec, but just to clarify then, so before the election, it was a political decision. After the election, it's an operational decision. You can see clearly why, in my earlier comment, I said that this seems to be a topic or an issue that the Mayor seems to use as a convenient excuse, and members of this committee can be forgiven for thinking that, and more importantly, the population of London can be forgiven for thinking that.
Sorry, is that a question or is it just a statement?
It's
a flourish. Let's call it a flourish.
Okay. If we can move on. Assemblymember Best.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, following on from the previous questioning, could I just recommend that you go back and read the 2017 Public Access Strategy, because what you've said there to Assemblymember Wilson just does not tally. The reasoning behind the Public Access Strategy in 2017 is akin to the reasoning behind the tough choices of 2025. There is no difference. So the position has changed to make that to suggest it's an operational decision. It's nothing in the scope of the change. It's a political decision to say it's now an operational choice. It's nothing to do with us.
Assemblymember Best, I want to be clear that we've never said it's nothing to do with us. That's why we have been part of the process.
So it is to do with you. I don't think you have been clear. So if you could state now it is our decision, that would be really helpful.
It's not our decision, but given that we set the police and crime plan and that we set the budget, we have obviously, throughout this process, pushed the Metropolitan Police on the savings that they've put forward, to understand that. It's why from the first proposal we asked for the legal basis on consultation. We also asked for more information on the equality impact assessments. We also, after the initial proposals on front counters, asked that they engage further with stakeholders,
So
especially
we're trying to find out who's responsible, so it was a joint decision.
No, it's an operational decision.
You just said I'm being clear that we were involved in the decision. Sorry, you just said I'm being clear we were involved in the decision.
No, I'm saying that because we are the budget holders, because we are the oversight body, it is our role to make sure that we are challenging and questioning the operational decisions that the Met has taken, and we have done that throughout this process.
But in 2017, there was a co-authored decision between the Met and MOPAC. In 2017, it was co-authored.
My understanding of that, obviously that's before my time, my understanding of that is because it was a mix of estate decisions and operational decisions around front counters.
But I would surely suspect that you have became Deputy Mayor, standing on the pledge that there'll be a 24/7 police front counter in every borough, and now you're being told as Deputy Mayor, there's nothing you can do, we're just going to close them. Would you not go back to 2017 and look and say, well, how comes they were able to be involved then and I'm not able to be involved now? Surely you would have questioned that.
As I've previously stated, we have pushed throughout this process. But I also think we have to be in the framework of a realistic budget.
I'm just asking about the ownership of the decision.
The decision is clearly an operational decision.
But in 2017 it wasn't.
Assembly Member Bett, I think the Assistant Commissioner wants to come in.
I mean, I was just going to try and help. This is a decision that's been made by the Met in part to fill the £260 million black hole in terms of the
With all
budget.
due respect, Assistant Commissioner, I don't think that you're understanding the questioning of the committee. I don't dispute that you're saying that you've taken this decision. What I'm disputing is why previously it was always the MOPAC and Met taking these decisions together, and why previously the Mayor would say that he had the ability to keep a 24/7 police station. I'm not disputing what you're saying now, so it's not. We don't need to go into that. But what I want to say, just to follow up on that, was there anything the Deputy Mayor or Mayor could have said to the Met to make them change their mind?
So, no, I don't think so, because we have to prioritise our operational resources.
So there was nothing they could have said to you to make you change your mind. Was it then irresponsible of the Mayor to promise Londoners that he could keep up at 24/7?
This isn't me holding the Mayor to account. It works the other way around, just to be clear.
Well, no, just to be clear, politicians should never promise that then.
So,
if it's all,
if I can just
say, if it's all your choice, then the statement clearly is it's irresponsible of politicians to promise to keep front counters open.
Let me say this. We make an operational decision.
No, could you answer the question?
I'm going to answer the question if you let me. We make an operational decision. The Mayor and the Deputy Mayor hold us to account for that decision. And in making our decision, there was test and challenge about whether this was the right thing to do.
Sorry, that's not the question. Is it irresponsible of politicians to promise to keep police counters open if that isn't their decision?
I'm not going to comment on politicians. It works the other way round. That's not what I'm here to do. Politicians hold me to account, not the other way round.
So it's okay to make promises that can't be delivered if everything's a choice of the Met?
As I said, it's a job of politicians to hold me to account. I don't hold them to account.
Would you not perhaps suggest it's irresponsible for the public that you serve? Because that's setting up an expectation for you as the Met to fulfil that could never be fulfilled.
I've been very clear on what my answer is.
I would debate the clearness. Okay, the final question from me, Chair, is just, Deputy Mayor, we now know, I've brought up with you previously the fact of how highly rapes are reported at a front counter. We now know as well that 32% of thefts are reported at the front counter and 38% of violent crime is reported at a front counter. We've heard it stated again from the Assistant Commissioner about only 5% of crimes, but do you not recognise that it's important to look at what crimes those are?
As previously stated, this is why, after the first proposal came forward and we engaged with stakeholders, especially those with protected characteristics, we have now got a proposal put forward by the Met that widens the amount of front counters that are open across London. So 27 counters will still be open.
So if you live in Waltham Forest, if you live where I live in Chingford, do you have the ability to go to your local station now because of the work you've done and report some of those violent crimes, thefts, rape? Do we have the same opportunity as other Londoners?
You still have a safer neighbourhood team. You still have an uplifting officers out on the street. You still have access to
we don't
phone.
actually have an uplift of officers on the street. That's incorrect. But if you, so we have the same access to a front counter. You're saying that you've recognised it's important. So I'm saying to you, looking at the type of crime that is reported at a front counter, does that not weigh on you that it's important that people have the access for that? Is it important to look at the type of crime, not just say 5% of crime? Is it important to look at the type of crime?
That's exactly why we pushed on what mitigations there were for the front counters. That's why things like the video phones, the appointments were essential as part of this operation, because we do obviously want to make sure that everywhere there are abilities to access, as well as making sure.
In Chingford, are we getting a video phone? No, is the answer, by the way. We're not.
So there will be a phone at every police station. We're trialling video phones in, I believe, 2 locations at the moment. The technology is sort of, we need to do some more work to make sure that it works properly, because there'd be nothing worse than expecting a video phone and it doesn't work. So
absolutely,
we've got it
it's
at
almost
2
like you could just walk into the front counter and know that you'll speak to a human and it will work. Yeah. But
I suppose, and again, the difficult choice is that were you to undo that, there would be fewer officers patrolling the street where the community say they need them most.
But that's not true, because it's public access officers that are in the police stations. But Deputy Mayor, I'm asking you, and I'll try one final time, do the people of Chingford now have that same access as other Londoners to continue to report at a front counter, to use a video phone? Do they have that same access as other Londoners?
Yes, because I believe that, you know, as previously stated...
So the front counter's opening?
No.
Okay. But you just said they have the same access.
Sorry, can I answer the question?
I was excited because you said they had the same access.
Member Best, let the Deputy Mayor answer the question, please.
95% of reports are made through the phone or over the internet. And I believe that people in Chingford have that accessibility. They also will have...
Do you know how many old people don't have access to the internet? Do you know how many? Do you know the percentage of people in Waltham Forest that don't have access to the internet?
The point is that neighbourhood policing has to be prioritised in the time when we have constrained budgets. We have had evidence after evidence that that's what people want. And that's why when we don't have the prioritisation to fund everything, we've taken the Met have taken difficult decisions to make sure that they have the officers on the ground. I think some of the statistics that AC Twist outlined at the beginning in terms of performance,
I'm just you're not answering the question. It's a really tight committee. Everyone wants to come in. I've just asked you one question. It's yes or no, and you're not answering that question. Do the people of Chingford have the same access?
I want the people of Chingford to make sure that they have a police force that, when there's crimes of the nature that you have outlined, are able to investigate those crimes, so are able to work to follow up on those issues. If we don't have the officers available because of the constraints we're under to do that, that is worse. We need to make sure that victims are supported. But in other boroughs, they get that
resource and they get a front counter.
Assembly Member Best, I think you've had the answer to the question. We do need to move on. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you and good morning. Deputy Mayor, was the Metropolitan Police budget in either balance or surplus in May 2024? Or was it in deficit?
Do you mean... Was
it in the black or in the red?
There's usually... at the end of the year, a surplus that we use for reserves, but obviously... So
the 260 million suddenly appeared overnight as a black hole?
No, because that's not really how the budget stacks up in terms of... Obviously, there's the capital budget, which we've discussed many times at this committee.
So in terms of the operational budget, we knew that there was a black hole going into the election, in broad terms. We knew that there was a money problem.
We knew at that stage there was. We knew that the underfunding had been there. However, we didn't know at that time where overall the government settlement would fall.
Well, we knew there was a problem with money. Okay, good. And following on from Assembly Member Wilson's questioning, the Mayor understood the distinction between a political and an operational decision before May 2024. I mean, it's a yes or no.
Yeah, yes, of course he
Good.
did.
OK. So was the Mayor wrong, therefore, to make a political promise over something which he recognised was an operational decision in his 2024 manifesto?
The Mayor set out a manifesto that he wanted to deliver on, and he's been unequivocal in that, that safety is his priority.
No, I understand that. That's neither here nor there. Safety is everybody's priority. Was he wrong to make a manifesto commitment on something which he recognised was an operational decision and therefore out of his hands?
In that the Mayor wanted to make sure that London had access to policing, and that at that stage we didn't know the settlement of the budget, and that we would have to make sure that we were taking, because all of the previous kind of low-level decisions had already been taken, we were now in a position where we had to take more difficult decisions. And the Mayor did all he could to lobby for that additional money, and we know overall we got a higher pot than usual because we were working with a Labour government of 1.16 million.
We're getting into the periphery here. Very simple question. Was the Mayor wrong, or, to use Assemblymember Best's description, irresponsible, to make a manifesto commitment on something which he knew was an operational decision and therefore had no control over?
Well, I've already answered.
No, you haven't. With all due respect, you have not. It's a simple yes or no. Was he wrong or irresponsible to make a manifesto commitment over something which he knew he had no operational control over?
I would disagree with that statement because...
No, it's not a statement, it's a question.
Well... So
the beginning, it starts with a question. Was he wrong? Was he irresponsible to make a manifesto commitment over something over which he had absolutely no control?
I wouldn't say that he was wrong or irresponsible to want the highest level of access for London for policing.
That's fair enough.
Because he then followed that up by making sure that he lobbied as hard as he could for national government, that followed in terms of when those tough choices came forward, that he went even further to get an additional 32 million to make sure that the tough choices were mitigated somewhat as far as possible. And he's worked alongside them at every point to prioritise neighbourhood policing. He's never shied away from difficult decisions around the council precept. He's been unequivocal in making sure that now a quarter of the Met's budget is funded directly by the Mayor.
Good. We've heard a lot about trust and confidence in the Metropolitan Police. Did he damage trust and confidence in himself, the public's trust and confidence in the Mayor, by making a manifesto commitment which he was evidently and self-knowingly unable to commit to? Yes or no?
I think that the Mayor has always been honest that he will fight for Londoners in their best regard, and especially in safety. After the budget, he was very clear that he was disappointed with the settlement they got, and he's been very clear that he fought as hard as he could to make sure that we got the budget that London deserved. But he's also, you know, not shied away from the difficult decisions that the Met have had to take. And I think that Londoners, you know, because we've asked them, have said that they want neighbourhood policing. They want to make sure that their town centres are safe. They want to make sure that things that they're concerned around high-volume crimes are the priority, and that's
my
what he's
residents in
prioritised.
Twickenham would like to have their front counter kept open, but that's not going to happen, apparently. One final question. Would you like to apologise for making that promise and for campaigning on that promise, particularly to those boroughs which are going to lose entirely their police front counter presence?
I don't think that the Mayor needs to apologise.
No, I'm asking if you, Deputy Mayor, would you like to apologise to Londoners, to those Londoners who are about to lose their police front counter this coming Saturday?
To those Londoners that are not going to have access to front counters, I want them to be assured that obviously the access that they will continue to get over the phone, of the internet, continues to be the priority. That we hope that the teams that they will see in their local town centres, the work that we're doing to prioritise high-volume crime, is part of that wider understanding that in constrained times, difficult decisions must be made, but that we are prioritising their safety.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor refused to apologise. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Hall.
Deputy Mayor, this absolutely is not good enough, is it? If you look at fine officers like AC Twist and the vast majority of other officers, they want to do the best for Londoners. The trouble is they don't have anywhere near enough money, which is why we're seeing front counters closed. These are the difficult decisions. Damn right they're difficult. And they're having to make them because they don't have enough money. The Mayor has got a £24 billion budget. He should be looking at other areas that he can reduce so that he can put some more money into the police, because he made lots of promises in the actual last election that he would keep counters open, that he'd increase police numbers on the street. All of that is going. All of that is going. And we send officers like Assistant Commissioner Twist to tell us that they're having to make difficult decisions. The truth is, the Mayor should put some more money, a lot more money, into the police, because what Londoners want is to be kept safe. And when officers have to make difficult decisions, damn right they're difficult decisions, and none of us agree with any of these decisions, including my Labour colleagues. When they're having to make those decisions, then the Mayor, who is in charge of this £24 billion budget, he should be looking at other areas he can get rid of, reduce, in order to put money into our Metropolitan Police Service. And you, as Deputy Mayor, should be apologising, because you all campaigned, and by God, do I know what you were campaigning on. I was there every moment of it. You should be apologising for the Mayor promising things he knew damn well that he wouldn't be able to afford. And if he wanted to make sure he kept his promises, he should be looking at that bloody great big budget, £24 billion, to see where he can reduce other things to give the police more money. You should apologise, and so should the Mayor. I'll leave it at that, Chair. I'm so cross with her.
Was there a question, Assembly Member Hall?
Will you apologise?
Assembly Member Hall, I think it's disingenuous for you to say that the Mayor hasn't funded the police. The Mayor's funding of the police went from 19% up to 25%, a quarter of his budget. He has always uplifted the precept on council tax to make sure that there is additional money for policing.
Look at where he could make savings.
Budget alone that I know you're discussing this afternoon, he's put in £4.5 additional million into making
Deputy
sure
Mayor.
that phone theft will be tackled.
Deputy
He's
Mayor.
going even further
Deputy Mayor,
to invest
I'm sorry.
into VORG services.
The number one priority should be keeping Londoners safe.
And
the police force cannot keep Londoners safe when their numbers are reducing drastically.
And that is why the Mayor prioritised neighbourhood policing. It's why in the last year
the
alone...
Mayor prioritises himself. He does not prioritise our Metropolitan Police, because if he did, they wouldn't be so short of money.
That's simply not the case. That is
I think
why,
you'll better take charge again, Chair, because this is really winding me up. He's got a £24 billion
Not so that anyone
budget.
would notice, Assembly Member Hall. I'm actually going to move on. Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. And it does follow on from that line of questioning, Assistant Commissioner. In August, when you were here for the plenary session, you said, I'm just going to quote what you said, "The point I would make is that some councillors have asked me if we could gather together some money, could we pay to keep the front counters open? And I'd say that if I had more money, I would not be investing in front counters." And I just wondered if that's still your position.
It is.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to the next section, which is about the Met's mounted branch. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. And probably you're all quite pleased that there was no manifesto commitment about horses. Could I ask Assistant Commissioner Twist, why was the decision made to make cuts to the Met's mounted branch?
Thank you, Assembly Member Roberts. The redesign reflects the financial reality and the operational demand analysis that we have made. Again, it's an operational decision. The mounted branch is reducing by 69 officers, 8 staff, and around half of its horses, moving us to 51 officers, 22 staff, and between 40 and 50 horses by March of this year. That will give us about a £3 million saving. and the estate is also being consolidated down into 2 main stable hubs at Great Scotland Yard and Hyde Park, plus retaining our training facility at Imber Court. I think, linked to the front counter discussion, this forms part of the tough choices that we discussed as part of filling the £260 million budget gap. It is clear it's really difficult because we use Mounted Branch significantly in protests, and I've already outlined some of the protest demand with sort of 1,530 centrally policed events in 24-25 compared to 850 in 2019. This just points further to the gap in the National and International Capital Cities grant. What I would say, though, is after the changes take effect, we will still have the largest mounted contingent anywhere in the country, which will sit within the sort of broader Met's task force. And we will still be significantly larger than any other mounted branch and still be able to meet our public order commitment. So 55% of our sort of mounted demand is public order. We will still be able to meet that commitment.
Thank you. Was there any consultation carried out prior to the announcements of the cuts to the mounted branch, and if not, why not?
So I don't think it's one where, in terms of consultation, do you mean public consultation or consultation externally or internally?
Well, all sorts of consultation, really. I mean, with the public, whether it's with the unions, all of that.
So we would have engaged with our staff, and of course I mentioned police staff and officers, so part of determining what we need to do will have been through discussions with our staff. But the financial reality means that things like public consultation and operational decisions like this won't really take us forward, because if I ask the public whether they want more or less mounted branch, they're likely to say more. If I ask them whether they want more or less front counters, they're likely to say more. The reality is, though, that we cannot afford them. And so we have to make choices to, whilst we are shrinking as an organisation, to ensure that our balance of investment changes to prioritise areas which we think are the most important, which are neighbourhood policing, violence against women and girls, public protection, in areas where our demand is also growing. So in our VORG space, I've said we've seen our performance in rape increase significantly, which is leading to increased reports of rape as victims have more confidence to come forward. But when I mentioned earlier to the committee that the sort of demand and complexity continues to grow, part of that demand is that we are now supporting victims not for sort of months but for years, because some of those victims that we're dealing with and supporting won't see justice until 2030 because we're listing Crown Court cases in parts of London in sort of mid-2030 now. So every sort of unit of demand takes a little bit longer, which is why we've got to really make priority-based decisions, and unfortunately reducing the mounted branch was one of those.
Sure. You mentioned at the very beginning, I think, some the outline of how this is going to be achieved. Could you just give us a recap on the timescales that we're looking at?
So the information I have is that we will have achieved the mounted branch reductions by the end of this financial year. End of March, yeah, this financial year.
So the end of next month?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There is evidence that mounted deployments are associated with greater levels of visibility and positive interaction with the public when compared with foot patrols. It's a bit like the TARDIS, I suppose. You know, you hear the hooves clopping along the street, and it's that sort of, it's a sort of multimedia intervention, I suppose. Is that public confidence and positive interaction at risk with the planned 25% reduction in the mounted branch? So,
of course, I mean, as speaker as an officer who once upon a time, many years ago, was dealing with a violent suspect on Kensington High Street, and some mounted officers came galloping down the road, and it certainly made a spectacle. We value them really highly. They do a great job. People like to see the mounted officers. Communities like to see them, and they have a great sort of, both in terms of operational presence for dealing with public order, but also a community presence. But again, the core issue is can we meet our demand with a shrinking budget, with tough choices, needing to save £260 million? We've had to look everywhere as to where we can actually reduce without impacting on our core services, including things like investigations, answering the phones, responding to calls, to try and get the performance improvement that I've outlined earlier. So, unfortunately, this is one of the things where we landed.
And of course, one of the, very much like police officers, one of the things that we are looking for is a constant turnover of, properly highly trained police horses. Will this cuts to the service necessarily have an impact on the pipeline of highly trained police horses and trainers, etc.?
So, no, we're maintaining our mounted training establishment at Invercourt. What we have been able to do is, in a measured way, the horses that are moving on, some of whom we've moved to West Midlands Police that are just starting a mounted contingent, and we may move some more. Some have moved into retirement, some have actually moved back to their original breeders. But we will continue our pipeline because it's a long course. It's a really significant course of training, both for the horses and for the officers to be able to do this. So it's very important that we maintain the pipeline both of horses incoming, but also of officers. And those officers that we have had to redeploy out of the mounted branch, we've looked to utilise their really unique skills into other roles in public order or other things where the skills that they've got to date and the training that they've had to date will be most useful.
Okay, and just I was going to ask about the future of the 40 to 50 horses which are being moved on. None of them have gone to live on a farm, I believe.
No. So no horses have been harmed in this process, is what I would say. We absolutely wouldn't see an option of putting horses to sleep as a solution to this for the budget. We've got, in each of our cases, very careful plans. Horse welfare, and we've worked with the Horse Society and others and our sort of specialist vets. Horse welfare is absolutely paramount, and those that have gone into retirement frequently will go and live on farms, but will see out their days there fully supported.
Good. You will appreciate that it's probably the one thing that we will get the letters about. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Hall.
And this has mainly been answered. It's about how we deal with the people with the skills. And the skills of these, I mean, I've been to the public order training. It's unbelievable. So just on a slightly different note, the officers that have got those skills specifically with the horses and are now redeployed somewhere else, are we likely to retain all of them? Or, I mean, I know from some that have called me in other places where they've been moved on, they're so upset that they've got these skills that are no longer going to be used by the Met. They've then considered leaving, and we're in such a dire state anyway. What's the situation there?
So we will try and support the officers as much as they can. It is clear, though, that some will be moving on and wouldn't have chosen to do so at that point. Overall, our position on attrition is good, and we compare well compared to national forces. So our attrition is slightly below sort of the overall national picture, which again I think indicates that we're doing something right. But it's a small enough number that we can ensure that they are supported. And as I've mentioned, we've tried to make sure that where possible they go into roles where their skills can be best utilised, because these will be operational officers who have sometimes worked for many years doing some really difficult public order and other operational roles as part of the mounted branch, and we value them highly. And I think hopefully they understand this isn't something that we have done lightly. It's a tough choice and it feels tough, but we will work with them to try and make sure we maximise their skills in their new roles.
Good. These tough choices have ramifications all over the place, which is why I'm so angry about the dreadful lack of money. Thank you.
Before we move on to the next question, could we just say a big hello and welcome to the school council from Ambler Primary School in Islington, who are all just coming in and taking their seats. Hello, welcome everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. Just got a couple of questions. How many horses have been injured or needed to be put down in the last couple of years?
I don't know.
Can we get that information?
Yeah, I'm sure I can. I can write to you afterwards. I don't have that information as to... I suspect the number will be very low, but I don't know.
Well, we're very concerned about police officers getting harmed. I think we should also be concerned about animals. You just mentioned that you were talking to people about ensuring that their welfare is because obviously if there's going to be less of them, there's a concern that the ones remaining might be overworked. You mentioned a couple of people you were talking to. I think you mentioned vets, or can you explain how you're ensuring that and who you're consulting on?
So that's in terms of the horses being overworked.
Yes.
We will make absolutely sure that isn't the case. Tasking is based on risk and will be prioritised. We will make sure that horses aren't deployed, beyond what operationally they would normally be required to do. So we're going to have to make choices. We will have fewer mounted branch deployments, clearly, but it's a very,
who you're speaking to, like who you're consult. Like there must be like do you have your own vet,
yes.
or do you have like?
Yes, we do.
Which groups and have you heard from different groups about the welfare of the horses? Like who talks to you about them?
So we talk to the British Horse Society, but we also have our own contracted vets who assist with this, and the officers and the staff who work in the stables are absolutely passionate about their horses and the welfare of them, so they wouldn't do anything that would jeopardise the welfare of the animals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can imagine the people working closely them wouldn't. Just from my understanding, would you say that the mountain branch and the horses are primarily used for intimidation? Like, is that their role in all these different settings?
No, quite the opposite, actually. I'll give you two operational examples. So the mounted branch can act as a force multiplier. 6 horses can do the job of 40 or 50 PCs if you're dealing with a football crowd, for example, on Wembley Way. The mounted branch are used to sort of slow down the crowd and keep people safe. People don't like pushing past horses, so they don't, whereas they may feel much more comfortable pushing past people. So as a force multiplier on public order operations, they are fabulous. They also reduce the need to resort to force because, again, people don't like sort of, engaging or being violent towards horses, so that's good. On the flip side of that is we see some brilliant community engagement. You see them out and about in parks, out and about in central London, but also in northeast London and Greenwich, where the engagement's brilliant. People who ordinarily wouldn't come and speak to officers will go and speak to a mounted branch officer because they're interested in the horse. And ask questions about it. So they
that's using the horses as propaganda.
They provide huge value. But in terms of just to address the point though, in managing crowds, in managing dense crowds, they provide officers with a vantage point which they can see. It enables communication. They can talk to larger numbers of people sitting from an elevated position on the horse. So they can be hugely valuable in that as well.
Great. My questions were about the kind of welfare and how we ensure that they are okay in all of those situations. So, it'd be really good to get that data on how they've been used and if they've been injured in the last few years. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. And Assistant Commissioner, I know you have gone into this, but as an animal lover and somebody who does rides, I really want to just emphasise that the horses who are going to be made redundant, can you absolutely reassure us and Londoners that they are going to be okay and their welfare will be continually monitored?
I can.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. Assembly Member Best.
Thank you. Assistant Commissioner, that was a very impassioned plea for why we shouldn't cut the mounted guard in your answers to Assembly Member Garbett. You spoke a little bit earlier about the protests use. Was there anything in general you wanted to add on the effect this will have on policing protest?
No, in short, because actually where we will reduce our deployment is outside the protest space, so we will still have the mounted branch available to deal with the core demand of protest, football and some ceremonials. So where we will see less visibility is in other duties, so the numbers that we've got will still be able to meet our core demand.
Could you expand on that then? So nothing's going to change in terms of deployment of the mounted branch at football matches, protest. Where is it that we'll see the reduction of mounted branch?
So I think it'll be on more routine patrols. There may be some impact because, again, to Assembly Member...
Could you explain that to me? Maybe I'm a bit too urban, but I don't routinely see the...
They are frequently out and about in central London.
So could you just be quite precise of what you mean? Because, like Assembly Member Bailey says, outside Parliament, that's quite a necessary deployment, I would think. So could you just be very precise about where you mean the routine patrols?
So it can be all over London. I don't think I can be precise because they respond to tasking. So if again, the horses are mobile. We can move them about in horse boxes, and through monthly tasking decisions, we can prioritise the best location to put them, and boroughs will bid to have mounted branch visibility in different parts.
And that's the bit we're losing?
Some of that, and I think unquestionably, with a much smaller mounted branch, there will be some impact on protest, but to reassure, the most important events, the ones where we will get the most, where we think that the deployment of mounted branch is most critical, they will still be serviced.
So there will be an effect?
I think there has to be.
Okay, but you just said that there wasn't. So is there going to be an effect on mounted branch presence at football matches?
I don't know, sat here, because what I don't want to do is say no effect at all and then find that one horse didn't turn up at one football match and I've been found to be wrong. I'm saying that in the main, our intent is that our public order demand will still be serviced, subject to horse welfare and subject to hours of availability. We will, as we always do, prioritise our highest risk and highest threat events and task the mounted branch accordingly where they can add the most value. But of course, if the mounted branch is much smaller, which it will be, there will be some things that we can no longer do. And I think at the most obvious things, we will see less tasking and less routine patrolling. We will still try and deliver our protest demand, but there may be, I can't say there'll be no impact, because there may be.
So, for example, at Parliament, we'll probably see less routine patrols. There will be effect on protest, and there may be an effect at football matches, but you can't say for certain right now.
So day to day, we don't see horses in Parliament Square routinely patrolling, other than they are routinely walked out of Great Scotland Yard, which happens to be off Whitehall. So we regularly will, that's one of our bases that we're remaining.
But you said when it's tasked on routine patrols, so I'm giving you an example of a routine patrol.
And if I sort of suggest back that one of the things that we do almost every day is the horses need to be walked and sort of exercised. Part of that is officers going out and, as our stable, and comes back to the choice of location as to where the mounted branch will be based. Our biggest stable is at Great Scotland Yard, so the majority of our horse asset will be at Great Scotland Yard, which is just off Whitehall. So you'll still see a lot of mounted branch activity within that central government security zone, because that's where we're going to have the sort of primary base.
I don't feel any wiser as to where we're going to see a reduction in the service, to be honest. It seems like you're keeping it quite open. But on that point around the protests, has any analysis done about, you said yourself that one horse is the work of 40 to 50 officers. Has any work been done about what the actual cost and pressure on extractions is that might cause?
On abstractions, it will have been considered. I don't have the exact detail. I said, a force multiplier, so 6 horses would equate to sort of 2 PSUs, so about 40 to 50 officers, as I mentioned. But I think the point is that we will see a reduction, but actually the revenue cost, the money that we're saving, is necessary as part of the tough choices we've had to make. And what we don't want to do is sort of denude community policing even further.
So we might see more abstractions as a result.
We may do, but I'm not going to put a number on it, because I don't know that. If we are reducing our headcount and we're sort of we may need more officers sort of used from elsewhere, then of course there may be some, but it will be, I couldn't put a number on it or say how often that would be.
It seems like it will be costly in itself to do that. Could you said you mentioned this slightly. There's strong rumours that the West Hampstead branch will close entirely. Could you give some clarity on that?
Yes, so I think I mentioned the stables will consolidate into Hyde Park and Great Scotland Yard. So the additional stables that are currently at Hammersmith, West Hampstead and Lewisham will close. So where we will see sort of reductions, you will see fewer horses there, because they won't be routinely patrolling out of those bases.
Okay, thank you.
Assembly Member Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Deputy Mayor, good morning, Assistant Commissioner. Deputy Mayor, we've heard from the Assistant Commissioner about some of the benefits of the mounted branch. As such, is MOPAC assured that the Met's decision to reduce mounted policing will not compromise public safety or operational resilience?
Well, I think as AC Twist has outlined, the prioritisation of public order and the work that they do around big events like football matches is based on a risk assessment. And as AC Twist has also outlined, the continual work they do on tasking makes it clear that they are taking decisions based on their operational knowledge and a risk assessment.
And similar to other Assembly members, I think that the main time I've ever seen the mounted branch is at sports matches. Are you convinced that that's not going to reduce the prevalence of the mounted branch at sports matches, given the reduction that we're going to see?
We've been told that 80% of Premier League matches will be covered. Obviously, as AC Twist has outlined, there's a reduction in the number of horses. So the work that they'll be doing to prioritise where those horses are deployed is based on risk analysis and the types of events and the numbers of people, for example. So all of that is being considered.
And 80% are going to be covered. Do we know what's currently covered at the moment?
So, no, again, I don't want to make up numbers on the spot. I think what's clear is a representative sample of 471 taskings between April and June 25 showed that 55% of our mounted branch deployments were for public order policing, with much smaller percentage of deployments devoted to sort of taskings, community engagement or ceremonial work. Our intent is, insofar as we possibly can, so in the overwhelming majority of cases, we will still be maintaining the mounted branch deployment in those public order taskings. I'm never going to sit here and say there's not one thing that might be missed, but I think the overwhelming majority of cases, our intent is very much that the public order will be prioritised, because that's where the horses act as that force multiplier, and so we need fewer abstractions, we need fewer foot duty constables. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, we will cover that demand with mounted branch, as we currently do.
And I presume in terms of that operational piece, the higher the threat, the more likely that event would be prioritised for mounted police?
Of course, and also where the mounted police can deliver best effect, because they may be really good at some things but less good at others. So there'll be an operational decision and then a prioritisation based on, as we do with all resources, frankly, whether that's surveillance, whether that's traffic, whether that's other things. We will always prioritise our resource to what we believe to be the greatest threat and where that resource can have the greatest impact. So, yeah.
Thank you both very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to the next section, we're going to ask a couple of questions on that, and then we're going to take a short break. So this is about workforce planning in the Met. Assembly Member Duval.
Okay, can you share with us a bit of an insight into one of your budget decisions around workforce planning? In December 2024, you funded allocation for 14 workforce planning roles in the Met. Can you just define what you think these roles are going to achieve? But also, can you tell us, have the roles been filled, and what's the impact they're having on improving workforce planning?
Lord Duval, thank you. I think I need to set a little bit of the scene here, in that the Casey Review called out the absence of strategic workforce planning, and we've acted on her assessment and built the foundations for a far more disciplined and demand-led system, so we can have better governance, data, and actually link our workforce to affordability, performance and frontline priorities linked to the strategy and set out in New Met for London. I think what Baroness Casey said was that the workforce, that our resource model had not materially changed for 5 years, and that demand and supply were completely out of kilter, which I think was a fair challenge. We had underinvested in it. In an organisation of over 40,000 people, we hadn't invested sufficiently in workforce planning. And over the last 3 years, we've built the sort of central foundations for a proper strategic workforce planning capability, and also strengthened how it works locally through local resource planning meetings. The strategic planning framework aligns demand, performance, people and resources, and the framework is already built into our force management statement. So workforce decisions are no longer made in isolation, and each move is tested on affordability and operational risk and frontline impact to make sure we never again get to a position where the number of people we think we have doesn't align to the number of posts that we have, that doesn't align to the budget, which is where we were a few years ago. So this is why these posts are important. We've strengthened the workforce planning function, so 38 staff across corporate planning, operational planning and deployment include the new specialist roles focused on forecasting, scenario modelling and longer-term insight, which gives us an important ability to look beyond the in-year picture and look 2 to 3 years ahead, which I think is critical, so we can link recruitment, deployment and retention decisions to future demand. In terms of, I can update you separately, Lord Duval, on whether every one of those posts has been filled. I can't do that today, but that's the intent of those posts, to enable us to much better align our strategic workforce planning to actually delivery.
So no more surprises on that workforce scenario of budget gaps created by police officers in the sense that we've got but we can't afford. Is that, in essence, what you think those posts are going to do?
So I think, taken collectively, the investment, and again, I don't want to be specific on individual posts, but taken collectively, the investment in workforce planning is absolutely set out to do that. We were in a position where the number of posts we thought we had wasn't the number of posts we had, and that wasn't the number we could afford, which meant that people always felt they had more officers than they felt they had fewer officers than they should, but in reality we couldn't afford them. So that's the really hard work that's been done over the last 2 to 3 years to really align that, to make sure our budget, our posts and our people are properly aligned and will remain properly aligned as we have to make changes to amend our balance of investment or to make further reductions if we need to make sure that the posts and the people are always aligned.
And is there an acceptance then that over the years, I mean, we've had some members around this table have had some experience of this in terms of the fire service, of what was being said and what was being actioned wasn't the same. What was being reported to the scrutiny body wasn't the right outcomes. Are you in a position then? Is there somebody who's managing these potential posts? Is there one officer at ACPO level who you can point to who says that's the ones who are going to hold them to account? So there are no further surprises, that we actually do know that we have the money for the people that we're going to employ and plan not just over a year, but over a 3-year period.
So I think this links to part of our headquarters redesign. Our Chief of People Services will be the person that ultimately is accountable for strategic workforce planning, and our HR director, who is at chief officer level but member of staff.
So, I mean, we've had an interesting debate about operational and non-operational. Who is the operational? Who is in charge of overseeing that? Who's going to hold up the flag if the organisation gets into a position of where it was recently? How do we stop that? Who's there holding the ring?
So I think there's a number of us. I mean, by committee, the management board of the Met is ultimately responsible for this. And we, certainly from a frontline policing point of view, I'm responsible for making sure that my posts within frontline policing business group, yes, and the respective assistant commissioners will be. But we do have a director of HR and a chief officer who's a member of staff that's responsible for sort of human resources and other support functions who ultimately will take the lead on things like workforce planning. But I'm clear. I want to be, I'm responsible for what happens within the frontline policing business group, and I want to be absolutely clear that the amount of money we have equates to the number of posts we have in our design, which then equates to the number of people we actually have. Those 3 things have to always be in alignment.
I thought that we had it going in alignment, and I was shocked to hear that we weren't. So, okay, so it's you that's going to hold this with a team of other senior, the management, with other members of the management board, that is going to be overseeing some of this work. Yeah. That's what I want to be clear on, because actually I don't think we can have any messy situations, because I think messy situations led to the chaos of where we are in the last budget round, of not understanding why we need to make some reductions in officers because of funding. Do you know?
Yeah, that's right. I feel accountable for this to make sure that the numbers we present are right, the numbers that sit within my business group are correct, and as I said, the money we have aligns to the right number of posts in the right place, and that aligns to the number of people.
So alongside that, are you going to be looking at the information flows that go to the Finance Committee and to this committee to make sure that we can, and the information that we receive, that we will be able to comment appropriately on some of those planning and some of those issues? So when you see a surprise happening or you see you're taking management action, we can understand that management action because we should be able to see it and track it. Are we going to get into that position?
So I think if asking the question, will we be providing accurate information and data to the Finance Committee and others, then yes, absolutely. It's taken a huge amount of work by the teams over the last sort of 2 to 3 years to get all of this in alignment, and Assembly members may be familiar with what we call the sort of Pillar 1 cuts, where we removed all of the posts that just weren't affordable, and then the Pillar 2 reductions, which actually, the Pillar 1 posts that weren't even in design, the Pillar 2 reductions which removed the posts that weren't affordable, and then we're left with the actual design where the posts that we actually can afford, and then we can hold ourselves to account for making sure those posts are filled. So yeah, I'm absolutely convinced that the information that you will get in those committees will be significantly better and will be the right information.
Okay. And can you just tell us what the matrix that the Met will be using to measure the progress of, look, I hate this word, it's in my brief and it shouldn't be in my brief, civilianisation. You're a civilian as much as anyone else. You're an important one because you have a warranted card. I think we should be talking about support services and warranted officers in that sense. There's no, we're all civilians, but you're special. I accept you're special, and I'm grateful for the work that warrant officers do. So can you tell us then what the matrix that the Met's going to be using to measure the progress of its support programme of support staff?
Thank you. I think we use the term police staff and police officers. We don't say civilian or officer. I think you're right in terms of that distinction isn't a helpful one. And going back to sort of Peel, the sort of public are the police and the police are the public, it's not that distinction. We just do different things and have different powers. In terms of the matrix, so some of the tough choices and some of the decisions that we've made have been to increase the proportion of police staff we have weighed against officers. And that, in the main, that is around making sure that we use warranted officers for things that only warranted officers can do, and where we can get the same outcome using a member of police staff that doesn't need to have the same powers and the same sort of operational demands, that we do that. The Met is slightly out of balance compared to most other forces, in fact all other forces, in terms of our officer to staff ratio is much higher, and that's been driven over a number of years by successive governments and administrations focusing on police officer numbers as being the only thing that counted. And I think we're moving away from that now, and we have an opportunity to civilianise, for want to use your word, some roles, such as some investigators within major crime is a good example, or we've got some really good examples in our contact centres where we had officers who were sat there answering the phone when you don't need to be a warranted officer to answer the phone, and we could better use those officers out and about in neighbourhoods. So we are working hard to align our workforce to make it the most efficient it can be.
Okay. Can I just very quickly, you may not be able to help me, but there's a rumour running, and actually I've seen it in Brighton, you would be aware of it, and it goes back to this workforce planning. You're about to move a number of PCSOs across to Transport for London in terms of managing the enforcement issues around red routes. I thought we had a team already there. You're not going to... You talked earlier about supporting our neighbourhood policing teams, and clearly PCOs have a major part in doing that. Can you drop us a line, if you're not familiar with this, about what the plan is? Because I'm worried about the numbers that are going, and where are you going to get those numbers from? And it seems to be that it's part of your workforce planning and about shifting the responsibility of who's managing, who's tasking, who's actually paying for this resource. I would hate to think that I'd go back and start asking questions in safer neighbourhood teams and find out we have no PCSOs in safer neighbourhood teams because you've given them to TFO.
No. So
I want to be assured of that.
So I'm very happy to send a written update as well, but to give a very brief verbal update, I think the PCSOs that you're talking about are those that do the red route enforcement only. So it's quite a small, discrete number that's fully paid for by Transport for London. As part of the changes that we've made to move sort of our transport for safer transport teams out of a dedicated command and into local BCUs to be locally led as part of our neighbourhood and town centre teams, but still supported by funding from Transport for London. The red route enforcement teams, which are a sort of very small number that have a very niche remit around enforcing red routes and speed, the intent is that they actually move to Transport for London who want to sort of deliver the service another way. So I believe this group will be subject to sort of 2P arrangements that will go across to Transport for London, but that's still under negotiation at the moment. So I think, to be clear, it's a small defined team that we're talking about that might move the other way. The bulk of the sort of changes are taking place are moving safer transport team officers under local neighbourhood direction and control, so we have more local accountability and visibility while still doing the work that's important for Transport for London.
Not wishing to take up too much time, I don't understand the distinction between the warrant officers doing transport enforcement and the PCSOs doing transport enforcement. Why would you split those and not transpose those and give those to local commands in terms of that? What you need to write to us.
I'm happy to write to you.
I think too much time, but could you include why is that split?
Of course.
Between PCSOs and warranted officers,
Of course.
Thank you, and thank you for both of you for your comments about the civilianisation programme, which have been noted. And my apologies, of course, it is now Assembly Member Lord Duval. My apologies for not addressing you properly earlier. Two more questions. So, Assembly Member Lord Bailey, we're surrounded by them. Lord Bailey.
I'm going to come to AC Twist first, please. The recruitment pipeline, in what ways has the budget constraints affected your workforce planning? I want to focus mainly on your recruitment pipeline. Is there any kind of bottleneck in it? So the concept I'd give you that you have a number of recruits, and then you have to get them through vetting and training. Has a reduction in your resources? And I want to use the word cut because the Deputy Mayor, when she has to make a cut, it's a tough choice. When anybody else has to make it, it's a cut. So it's a cut. So the cut in your resources, has it made it any harder to keep those numbers where you need them to be?
So, Lord Bailey, thank you. The workforce size and shape is determined by the amount of funding that we have. And I think it's worth noting, I might have mentioned it at the start, that since 2012, the Met has delivered over £1 billion in terms of savings and efficiencies. And the long-term pressures that we'd built up led to the £260 million budget gap that we're familiar with, requiring immediate action. So that gap in 25-26 required 15 tough choices and a reduction of about 1,700 people. We have a good pipeline of people that want to join the Met. But obviously, we need to be careful to make sure that we only bring people in that we can afford, to Lord Duval's point around making sure that our workforce plan aligns with the amount of budget that we've got. Next year, our intent is to stabilise numbers at around 31,000 officers and just under 12,000 staff and about 1,300 PCSOs, which requires a recruitment of about 2,200 officers to replace those that are leaving, either through sort of retirement, as many will do, and I've mentioned that our attrition rate is lower than many other forces. One of the challenges we have is where there is uncertainty on funding or where funding is ring-fenced and is uncertain to continue. So one of the things that causes sort of challenge is where you get sort of time-limited funding or funding that you can only get for certain things, which means that we have to make a risk-based decision on whether you recruit into the whole organisation and then risk having an unaffordable model if the funding then dries up, or do you not, and then risk actually that funding is claimed but just leaves abstractions elsewhere. So I think that's the answer to the question, in that there is always, as part of our workforce plan, a judgment on how many officers we need to recruit. We know in the next 12 months we'll be recruiting in about 2,200. Whether that stays at that number or gets more or less will ultimately depend on what the budget is set for next year, so we make sure we don't end up with an unaffordable model.
So what you're saying makes perfect sense. You can't recruit beyond what you'll be able to pay for in the future. What I think I want to add to that is who is helping you with this planning process. I am of the opinion that the Met's workforce planning has been very poor in the past. The conversation you've just had with Lord Duval would indicate that. I personally want to congratulate you for taking some responsibility and saying you think you're responsible for looking at those numbers. Thank you for that, because somebody had to be. But what could the Mayor do and the government do so you could plan over a longer period? Because it seems to me, because of your highly specialised training and your high need for vetting, only a year's notice could leave you with a particular problem. You know, you may need to uplift numbers but can't, because you can't get people through that bottleneck quickly. So what kind of horizon would be useful, and how could the Mayor help you have a longer horizon?
So, Lord Bailey, thank you. I'm not going to comment on the Mayor of the Government for the reasons I've outlined earlier, but what I would say is that planning on a one-year financial horizon is very difficult for any large organisation. If we had certainty over a greater number of years, possibly 3 years, that would allow us to would allow our workforce plan to be much more stable. It would allow us to make more strategic decisions around things like estate, around things like workforce mix and other things. So if you ask me what's the one thing that would make workforce planning easier, I think having a 3-year financial cycle as opposed to a 1-year financial cycle would certainly help.
So, Deputy Mayor, to come to you, have you heard that before? And what plans do you and the Mayor have, and what actions have you taken to support the idea that the Met should get a 3 to 5 year funding settlement?
Yes, definitely. We've definitely heard that before and have made representations to the Home Office about the importance of recurrent funding. I would add also that the importance of us finding ways to sort out ring-fence capital funding, or an ability to have money to use on capital, because at the moment, obviously, I know we've discussed before, not having that funding is leading to increasing budget borrowing, which obviously has an effect on revenue as well. So we definitely agree on those two areas in terms of recurrent funding. I would furthermore say that the recognition through the NIC, the Capital Cities grant that we need, making sure there's ongoing commitment to that, given some of the issues we've discussed today around public order, state visits, is really important.
Thank you. Come back to AC Twist. Look, the Labour government have given you £42 million for funding for additional officers and PCSOs, which sometimes are confusing to the public because we're losing officers overall. So I just want to put that on the record. I see the problem here that funding is ring-fenced and has very little flexibility at all as to how you can use that. So how do you feel about the ring-fenced approach, and would it be better if you were given that money with a little bit more flexibility, and if so, what different things would you do, or additional things would you do?
Lord Bailey, thank you. I think whenever things are ring-fenced, it does make it harder, because if you are in an operational context of overall reduction and money is ring-fenced for a specific function, there is a risk that as the organisation shrinks, you end up more bent out of shape. What I would say, though, is that our priorities in many cases align, in that neighbourhood policing is one of our priorities, and I would, if I had more money, put more officers into policing neighbourhoods for the reasons that I think all Assembly members would agree. One of the things that most people say to us is that they don't see enough officers in their local community, and we're determined to try and fix that. So as we get smaller, the proportion of officers we're investing in neighbourhoods gets bigger. The Deputy Mayor's mentioned the NIC, the National International Capital Cities grant, and I think it's on record that we believe it's structurally underfunded, which then leads to London's sort of taxpayers funding the capital city function. through abstractions from community policing to police sort of protests and events in central London to a significant amount. I think our estimate is that it's about £180 million short of what is needed. The other ring-fence funding comes often linked to grants, and making sure that those grants are sufficient to cover the activity that is sought is really important. So we've heard of, Assembly members will be familiar with the work ongoing with Op Beacon Port to make sure that, which is looking back at child sexual exploitation, to make sure that that's funded. And we're working with the Home Office colleagues and others to make sure that other specific grants, things like Operation Northley, which is the investigation into the Grenfell Tower tragedy, is fully funded, such that the effectively wider London isn't needing to pick up the sort of sole bill for that sort of thing. So the more, as will be obvious, I think, the more ring fences you have, the less flexibility you have in workforce to meet changing demands. So as a principle, we would prefer money without ring fences, but actually in some cases where the priorities align, then it doesn't make much difference.
But one priority, and correct me if I'm wrong, which I think ring fencing has been a real challenge, is around bringing in more support staff, because you said your ratio of officers to support staff is very high. My understanding is you haven't been allowed to address that with the monies you've been provided for extra officers. Will that be helpful to help you, to use your words, bend yourself back into shape, as it were?
Thank you. I think that's now changing. I think there's greater flexibility between the officer and staff ratio, which will be helpful.
Well, let us know when that arrives, because I think that would be particularly helpful, because we talk about a lot of community officers and senior officers, and that's correct, and everybody wants that. But actually, there's something even more important than that, and that's sanction detections. And the Met has a very, very long way to go on that. And that flexibility may help with that problem. Let me move you on, AC Twist. In the 2024 report on strategic workforce planning in the Met, many things are highlighted: the cost of living, the lack of trust between the public and the police, the accountability regime stacked against officers, which is a theme I want to return to, as barriers to recruitment. What steps are the Met and MOPAC currently taking to tackle these barriers, and what progress is being made? Excuse me, let me just quickly start with the Deputy Mayor, and then I'll come to you, AC Twist.
Thank you. So, obviously, I've mentioned previously the Mayor's work to create a wider key worker scheme, which will also include police officers, talks to the cost of living issue. The AC Twist outlined that currently there is a pipeline of officers ready to be recruited and in line with current demand. But also I want to recognise that AC Williams is doing really important work in highlighting campaigns, recruitment campaigns, which we're supporting her with on being part of the change. So making sure that we're talking about the positive culture that the Met is working very hard through New Met for London to create as a really important part of the recruitment pipeline. Additionally, the work that we're doing to support in the Leadership Academy and the frontline training that officers receive is also really part of an ecosystem that we're trying to create in terms of making sure that officers are recruited and retained. And I'd also highlight the really important work that's happening in the welfare space, because obviously primarily, Lord Bailey, you're asking about recruitment, but also it's very important that, given the nature of the work that the police do, is that retention and recognising the importance of the welfare support they need.
Retention at this point is probably more important, because we need a police service that has some corporate memory, and an influx of new people is great, but as long as we have the older people to train them to do the job. I want to just focus on this idea of morale and the effect that that's having on recruitment and potentially more likely retention. I've put on record that I think your office and the Mayor's office are terrible for the morale of the Met police officers. And I wonder what actions you could personally point at that serving officers would feel helps their morale, helps them to stay part of the Metropolitan Police Force.
Well, obviously, I disagree. The work of me and the Mayor is damaging to the morale of the police service. I would point to the constant work we do to highlight the great work that officers do through visits, also highlighting the work that officers do in certain areas, like we've mentioned previously, certain operations, and the importance that we deeply hold of the work that they do. Similarly, when I go out on visits to neighbourhood teams, when I go out on visits to the road shows, making sure that I'm constantly, because I am grateful for the neighbourhood work that officers and PCSOs are doing, being open to conversations, very purposely asking, what's going well, but what also needs to change is part of our remit, and that's the work that myself and the Mayor does, but also the wider MOPAC team do when they sit on various meetings and boards with officers on specific issues, including trust and confidence.
The last time I spoke to you, you talked about talking to representative groups within the police service. One of the biggest groups, the Police Federation of England and Wales, were very quick to tweet that you've never met with them. Why is that?
I'm now setting up a meeting with the Met Federation, so that's in train.
Oh, the power of Twitter. Well done. Let me come to you, AC Twist. What things do you think your frontline officers specifically would like to see changed in order to help them feel that the new regime is for them and not against them?
Thank you, Lord Bailey. I will answer the question. There's a couple of framing points to make, I think, because we touched on recruitment, and I think we make the point that affordability and the cost of living in London, particularly for junior officers, is quite a significant challenge. It falls harder at these sort of earlier stages of service because police pay is set nationally, whereas obviously the cost of living in London and the South East is significantly greater. I mentioned that our attrition rates are pretty good, so between 6.7 and 7% attrition, whereas the national average is 7.5 to 8%. So actually, in terms of retaining some of the experience, we are seeing that is true. And I don't think the barrier to joining isn't public appetite at the moment, in that we've got good candidates that want to join, but the barrier at the moment is certainty over how many people we can afford in the coming year. I think in terms of, to answer your question, the Deputy Mayor's mentioned welfare. We know the 2025 National Police Wellbeing Survey showed that 45% of officers report facing frequent burnout. We know that 55% report facing persistent fatigue, 60% say they struggle to take breaks, and mental health now we see forms a significant part of officer sickness, which it didn't do some years ago, certainly when I remember, which is why the well-being strategy from 2026 to 28 is going to be so important. So improving our well-being, improving our training, particularly those for officers in high-risk roles, psychological screening, trauma peer support, 300 structured trauma interventions following critical incidents, what we've done, and 2,200 blue light champions and 800 mental health first aiders. I think all of that's important. I think officers are worried about scrutiny and accountability, not because they don't think they should be accountable, not because they don't think there should be scrutiny. Quite the opposite. Probably the police officers in London are probably the most accountable and most scrutinised public servants anywhere in the world, I would suggest. What they want is fair accountability, and we hope that the accountability review and the measures that have been outlined as part of that will go a large way to assist with that. And also public support from politicians, from senior leaders, from leaders in the Met. And I'm very clear that if officers make decisions in good faith, in a split second with partial information under huge pressure, even if things don't go perfectly, they would have my support. Equally, we need to be robust, ruthless in removing from our organisation those officers who corrupt our integrity. And the work that we've done over the last 3 years to remove 1,500 officers who don't share our values and are not fit to wear the uniform is a testament to that.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor, the AC Twist has just made a comment that if his officers make a tough decision in a split second, they'll get the support. Do you believe that frontline officers feel that's the same of you and the Mayor?
I would hope that the work that we've done with for example, the London Policing Board to do dedicated workshops, particularly around, for example, specialist services, so TSG and firearms, to do a deep dive to understand the kind of pressures that they're under, everything from those split-second decisions to the living standards, not their living standards, but where their estates are based, and the conditions that they're in, show that this is something, because this is something that we saw in the Casey review, really does need understanding and tackling. Similarly, I regularly meet with the IOPC to understand what's coming through, but also understand that the Met are making those regular referrals, but also that the timeliness of those investigations. We've heard that obviously from officers that these investigations dragging on for a long period of time also is really impactful for them, as well as the kind of person who might also be involved from a non-police standpoint. So I think that we try to make sure that we are recognising how challenging the work is. When I've been out on door raids, I really recognise how hard the work of the Metropolitan Police Service is. So it's important that there is that welfare support, and I really welcome the strategy coming forward.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Can I say that all of that work is irrelevant and undone when you behave, and the Mayor behave as the way you did, and the GLA, funnily enough, in the case of Chris Caber. When that happened, and your reaction to it, and the Mayor's reaction to it, wipes out any perceived good work that you may think has happened. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is your point on IOPC. I believe you could really support police morale in London by vocally, publicly arguing for the length of the investigations to be reduced. I understand that they're complicated. I understand it can't happen in every case, but police officers, I've had it from frontline police officers, they do not believe that you as Deputy Mayor for policing and that the Mayor as the Mayor of London are doing enough to support their need to have those reduced. And the last thing I'd say to you is that we have a number of police officers, both nationwide and in London, who've committed suicide, and those records are not kept. And I would like you to commit to go back to the Met and understand, do they collect those statistics, and what they do with those statistics. I fully accept you're not in charge of the rest of the country, but do the Met connect those statistics, and who do they provide them to? That would be very, very important. Thank you.
So to come back on those points, first of all, on the Chris Caber case, I think we both recognise how difficult it was for the officer involved, but also, it's very important, and that's why the IOPC has those regulations, especially when someone dies due to police action, that those things are properly investigated. And there was at the time a criminal investigation that was going forward, and it would have been it's really poor practice to talk about live investigations.
You're correct, Deputy Mayor. Let's be clear. You and the Mayor and members of the GLA did a lot of talking about that.
Assemblymember Bailey, please could we let the Deputy Mayor answer?
Well,
please could we let the Deputy Mayor answer? You asked a question, let her answer.
Chair, it's not particularly helpful when you roll to the rescue of the Deputy Mayor. She's a grown-up, she can answer questions herself.
Yeah, well, she's trying to answer. You're interrupting.
Really love to answer.
And my role here as Chair is to ensure that that happens, Assemblymember Lord Bailey. So if you'd let the Deputy Mayor answer, and then we will go to a break. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
And then on the welfare and suicide point, I know that this is something that you've written to us about, and also that we have written to the police about. I understand that it's difficult, as we all know, with national statistics and how death by suicide is recorded, but we have asked for that.
Thank you on that last point. And to be clear, the Chris Caber thing, you and the Mayor and the GLA did too much talking, and you made a lot of assumptions before there was enough evidence to have a proper public conversation. So the idea that you'll sit there and say that the IOPC has rules and that the rules were adhered to and that we need a proper investigation, everybody knows we need a proper investigation. But it didn't stop you and the mayor saying stuff that was utterly devastating to rank and file police officers who you helped be found guilty in the court.
Is there a question?
No, there isn't a question, actually.
Okay.
I'm telling you something.
Sorry, I thought it was a question and answer session.
No, there's no question. I'm telling you something.
So I'm just being
that your behaviour and the Mayor of London's behaviour was devastating to the morale of police officers in London. You helped them be judged in the court of public opinion quite harshly before the evidence was out there. That is what I'm telling you. And if you want a question, here you go. Do you agree?
No, I don't agree.
Well, you should do. You really should do.
You've asked me a question and I will answer it.
No, you just told me.
I do not agree. I take the morale of police officers very seriously. It's why I regularly go out and meet with officers. I'm very respectful of their work. I recognise how difficult the work of firearm officers are, and that is why I've worked with the London Policing Board to get further understanding of that and worked with the police service to make recommendations on how to support them further.
Right, thank you. I'm going to call a break now. We've had over 2 hours. Thank you, Assembly Member Lord Bailey. If we could be back at 12:06, please. Thank you. Would like us to pick up the pace, please, because we do have a hard stop at 1 o'clock and we've got quite a few questions to get through. Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. So my question is, why was DXC selected to lead the Met's digital transformation program? If we could start off with you, Kaya, and then come to you, Assistant Commissioner.
So this is a contract worth £347 million to, as we've kind of previously touched on, the need to fix the foundations of the Met, and this programme enables the Met's HR, finances and resource management systems to be transformed. So that's why. So they're the provider of the global technology service.
Right. So presumably there's a tendering process, and
Sorry.
And you went through a process of tendering the contract, and
yes. So it went through a procurement process, a tendering process, and then they were awarded the contract.
Yes, thank you, Assembly Member Desai. I mean, the DXC contract will deliver us the new Oracle Fusion Enterprise Resource Planning System and a total mobile resource management system alongside outsourced transactional HR, commercial, finance, recruitment services that will standardise how we operate. I mean, it's clear that some of these systems are really legacy systems. The resource management system we use was in place when I joined in 1996 and was a bit clunky then. So these are systems that need sort of urgent replacement, and will address our technical debt and the end-of-life risk we have on some of these systems.
Thank you. And if I could, my second question is to you, Assistant Commissioner. What risks have been identified in replacing the Met's core ERP and resource management systems, and how is the Met ensuring continuity of critical HR, finance and commercial services during the transition period?
Yes, of course, any major technical replacement and upgrade will bring with it risks. It will be managed through a programmatic process to ensure that the technical replacement alongside the business change runs in parallel, such that we can get the benefits. I mean, the purpose of doing this is to replace sort of a massive technical deficit, actually, and an end-of-life risk, and consolidating all of this into one place. So I think from an operational point of view, it's going to be hugely impactful in that leaders will have real-time access to skills, training, availability, including sort of things like an automated emergency roll call function, which doesn't exist currently, and will also allow us to support evidence-based decisions on how we deploy our officers and hopefully increase confidence in our sort of duties and knowing where people are. So I think it's there are risks with any technical programme, but through the programmatic approach and the experience of those people involved, we're looking to minimise those.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Best.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you just said that the contract was valued at £347 million. The previous figure released was £370 million. Has that changed?
That was 370 was the ceiling point, but it came in at 347.
So it came in under budget?
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about front counters. It would not take much money to fund our front counter in Chingford, for instance. I think it's about 350 grand for the next year. So perhaps maybe you could have a look at that underspend and redeploying that.
I mean, AC Twist has already been quite unequivocal that that wouldn't be something that the Met would, through their operational expertise, recommend doing.
No, but we're not going to rehash this, but I'm not asking the Met, I'm asking you, because obviously you and the Mayor believe that having a 24/7 front counter is important, so I'm asking you.
As you said, let's not rehash this, because
I'm asking you to look at it. So I'm not asking you to look at it.
To make a decision based on against the expertise advice of the operational decision that's already been taken.
But you can make manifesto pledges based on based on that.
We've been over that already.
Okay.
That was based on the information at the time.
Well, we've just found out that we've just got £23 million that we didn't know we had.
Can I clarify that? I think it's important. I think the contract award is the approved contract spend ceiling is £370 million. The number the Deputy Mayor has got outlines, I think, where we are now, but obviously this covers a period of time. It's not just it covers the sort of 5 to 7 year span. So I think in terms of our budgetary planning, we would still need to work on the basis that we may need 370 million available, albeit at the moment the anticipated cost is what the Deputy Mayor has outlined.
Okay, so
I don't think we have a surplus, is what I'm saying.
So the cost allocated is 370 million, but you are hoping to spend less, but you've already told the contractor that you've got 370 million pounds in the bag for this. So I would imagine that cost will rise.
Well, I hope not. I mean, we've got measures in place with milestone tracking, earned value measures and controls to prevent that.
Well, let's see, because based on the previous project with Connect, that was 101% over budget with NEC. We have put questions in to ask about the lessons learned, whether there's been an evaluation of that, and not received answers.
I mean, I think that's something we can pick up offline as to who you've written to and in what context. And, of course, if there's a sort of letter in, we'll respond to it.
The Mayor, but I would imagine he would come straight to you for that answer. So are you using any, has there been an evaluation of why that happened, which is then being used to make sure we don't fall into the same traps with this contract?
So I think, as with any large programme, there's review work done to see what's happened. I'm not going to get drawn on the fiscal point particularly because I don't have the information to date as to have we done a specific analysis of that. I would expect that work has been considered, but
you're not
I don't want to commit to something here that I don't know. So,
but you're not sure that it has been done.
No.
You don't think it's important that we do a fiscal analysis of the 101% overspend on our previous IT contract before entering into a £370 million contract with another contractor?
So to be clear, what I'm saying is, having not seen it myself in the last period of time, I don't want to say definitively. I'm not sure that has been done, and of course it's important we take these things really seriously. This is public money at the end of the day. And we've got to spend it wisely, and we will take any lessons we have from previous programmes to make sure that we're spending as wisely as we can. Equally, technology and things are moving really fast, and we have a significant technology debt that we need to sort of upgrade.
Absolutely, but these are some of the basic questions, and I felt the same on the mounted branch. Like, you know what you're coming here to answer, and these are some really basic questions we should get the answers to. In terms of the new contract, what CPIs are you using to track success of that?
So I said the approved contract spend, the commercial structure currently protects public value. The build phase is at a fixed price with milestone tracking using earned value measures and controls to prevent excess profit. The Met will help ensure delivery discipline while managing the financial risks of the Met. So taken together, the benefits are significant, and we're going to track the contract and the spend very closely.
So you have a list of CPIs?
So can you be just see
the cost performance indexes?
I don't have that in front of me.
Again, it's the sort of information we'd expect. Would you be able to send us that?
I'll certainly go back and look at what we have and what would be sensible to send for the reasons that you've outlined. But yeah, of course, if we have a list, this is sort of no reason why we wouldn't be transparent about it.
Well, you should have a list. So if you didn't have a list, that'd be crazy. We're not talking small amounts of money. We're talking about £370 million. It's not. These are sensible. I don't understand. It's just the lack of information on this.
Should we let the Assistant Commissioner go back and find out what information is available that can be sent to us, Assembly Member Best?
Yeah, thank you. Because the last question that we had here was around managing success and money saved. But I don't think you have that information either, because you might just give me a spiel, a word salad, but I mean an actual answer.
To which question, sorry?
In terms of how we will achieve value for money in savings in the long term, will this give us savings in the long term, and how are we going to manage the success of it?
Yeah. So the benefits will be set out in a full business case, which will have been approved by the board and will have been approved subsequently by
but the question
MOPAC.
is for you to tell us that, not to say it's been approved in the business case. I'm asking you.
So without the business case in front of me, I'm not going to list the benefits, and sort of what I don't want to do is mislead the committee. I know what I think it is, But equally, I want to be, if we want to be accurate, then the benefits will be set out in the business case, and I will happily supply those to you.
Of the savings. What's the ballpark of the savings?
Sorry, I didn't. As I said, I'll set that out to you separately.
But I'm sure that you were told that we were going to ask questions about this. I'm sure you were told that we were going to ask questions about the mounted garden. I just don't understand why none of that information comes to the committee. Because otherwise, what's the point? We might as well all go and have lunch, and then you can send us all the data later. Anyway, Chair.
Thank you. To be fair, I think you've asked very, very specific technical questions. So I think the fairest thing is for the Assistant Commissioner to do what he said he's going to do and come back with those responses in a written format.
I would say they're not technical.
But thank you for raising those, Assembly Member Best. Assembly Member Roberts.
I have nothing further, Chair. The points I was going to ask have been covered.
That's exactly the kind of supplemental question that I like. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next section, officer misconduct and dismissals. So the first two questions are mine. Deputy Mayor, how is MOPAC measuring whether the £90 million investment in culture and standards is actually changing day-to-day behaviour across the Met? And could you tell us what it's been spent on, please?
Thank you. Yes, so in terms of what it's been spent on, we spent £12 million funding the Met's new Leadership Academy, which launched in April 2025 and provides value-based training and continuous professional development to MPS leaders, both sergeant, chief superintendent and their police staff equivalent to help raise standards across the organisation. Similarly, the Mayor has supported 200 additional standards officers who proactively seek out wrongdoing. And we have also continued to prioritise the work on cultural reform throughout the budgets, both last year but also in the new Met for London funding. In terms of our oversight of that, obviously we have the London Policing Board Culture Committee where we regularly question how this money is being spent, but also the effect that it's have and the impact it's having on officers. And we recognise the ongoing commitment to this. We've obviously seen the 1,500 officers removed through the Met and the vetting and misconduct standards being some of the highest in the country.
Thank you. So, Assistant Commissioner, the internal reporting of misconduct has troubled, we understand. Can you tell us how the Met is distinguishing between increased confidence to reports and the actual increased prevalence of misconduct?
So that's a really hard question to answer. I mean, what we're pleased about is that people now do have the confidence to report and confidence that action will be taken. That's illustrative of the increase in standards that we've been driving for since the Commissioner started. I mean, we have had the toughest crackdown on standards and misconduct in decades. Exiting, as we've said, 1,500 people. We've seen the internal reporting increase. We've seen our anti-corruption work increase. We've seen that vetting has been tightened. We're now currently processing 18,000 vetting applications annually, and our refusal rates have doubled. So I think it's really significant. It's a bit like dealing with some other crimes where you know that there's underreporting. We knew 3 years ago that people were underreporting cases of misconduct because they didn't have the confidence anything would be done. We wanted to see the numbers of reports increase. It's very hard to define when you get to a point where actually everything is now reported and actually seeing the numbers come down is a good thing. But what we are doing is giving our officers both the confidence and the mechanisms to either report anonymously or to report directly or to report through line management, and to give them the confidence that we will act.
Thank you. Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. Just to dig into the data a little bit more, how many of the increase in reporting, how many people making the reports have you looked at by rank? how many people are making reports? Like, is it commonly lower ranking officers, higher ranking officers, or is there no kind of difference?
So I don't have that information in front of me. We can provide it. My expectation would be that the bulk of the organisation, it's a pyramid, is we have far more constables and junior officers than we do more senior officers. My expectation would be that the bulk of the reporting is coming from more junior officers.
Because that would be challenging that kind of the power imbalance and what you were saying about people being too concerned about reporting, because that will really show if the people, the kind of more junior officers are feeling confident to report. Digging into the data from another angle, so obviously in the interim report that Casey did, she highlighted that white officers were dealt with less harshly than black or Asian officers. And in 30 Patterns of Harm, Dr. Daniels reported a similar finding, saying that the misconduct system in the Met is not applied with the same logic to all staff, and there's obviously loads of diagnostic insights that she outlined. So I just wondered if you can speak to how that's persisted within the Met and what you're doing to address that.
So I think it's really important, and we've taken that hugely seriously as part of phase 2 of our culture, standards and integrity ecosystem that we're looking to build. It is clear there is disproportionality within the conduct system, and there has been for a while, both in terms of the entry point but once you get past the entry point, actually the outcomes become less disproportionate, which is an interesting point. But the new model we're trying to build looks at early detection, targeted intervention, sustained change. So by the summer of this year, we will have a sort of business as usual process that is looking to spot things and identify sort of gaps, identify if there may be disproportionality. What we're looking to do as well, and I think is really important and will be critical to this, is the sort of Enterprise Data Observatory, the sort of fusion cell, which will enable us to look across over 90 data sets linked to misconduct, vetting, human resources, welfare, to identify things like higher risk teams, emerging behavioural patterns, and then deploy targeted interventions into teams before problems arise. So we think it's really important. We are looking at disproportionality where it exists, both in terms of our PDR gradings and how that works, because again, we see some disproportionality in that, as well as our entry into the misconduct system, and we're looking at ways that we can eliminate that.
And have you specifically picked up some of the, through the structural companion guide and through the notes that Dr. Daniels made, just, some prompts around kind of when a misconduct is handled informally or not, what safeguards are being put in place to prevent racial bias, all those kind of things. Have you picked that up, and is that part of the work that you've just described?
So these, Dr. Daniels' report is really important. It's part of the Met's journey to becoming an anti-racist organisation. The observations she made about the conduct system and about those things are really important and are forming part of the work that AC Williams is leading, linked to what you've described. So yes, very much so.
And when would you expect to see that disproportionality in the entry point coming down? Like, when is there a point where you're going to, that you're looking to set? Because it's obviously really urgent that all officers aren't, that is applied, equally with the same logic to all officers.
I agree. I think the latest is we've seen some small reduction in it already in the sort of recent months. I think it isn't, but as Dr. Daniels outlined, this isn't a quick fix. This is an enduring conversation and an enduring movement towards making the Met anti-racist. It's also there's also sort of things that we need to look at around the sort of demography of the workforce in terms of our youngest workforces, our most diverse workforce. So where we end up with sort of it's also important for us to look at where those sort of elements of misconduct are happening. Is it all in younger years where we've got more diversity, which is a great thing? Is it happening in mid-service? Is it happening in later service? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to track this.
Great. And just briefly, on the 90 million that's been invested, what specifically have you got some key highlights about what that actual money has been spent on?
So absolutely. I mean, the Deputy Mayor's outlined already growth in our anti-corruption command, our leadership training. The leadership and culture training is scaled to a level that we've never seen before. 99% of sergeants and inspectors and all chief supers have completed structural leadership training. More than 32,000 officers and staff have completed New Met for London cultural training.
I know we're short on time. Is it okay if you send that to us, but specifically how the money's been spent, rather than just like X on external training back? Because 90 million is quite a lot of money, but it would just be good to see how that's broken down.
We can absolutely send that.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Members, we do need to pick up pace. Assembly Member Hall.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Assistant Commissioner, how many Met leaders have been removed or sanctioned for failing to challenge misconduct or uphold standards?
I don't have that information to hand. I can provide that separately.
If you can send that. The Met staff survey in 2024 showed that only 25% of officers believed that inappropriate or unwanted sexual behaviour was dealt with appropriately. How are you ensuring that these matters are not just reported but actually dealt with appropriately?
So I think that links to the reporting increase that we've seen and the confidence that we think people now have to report. And again, it's anecdote, but I go and speak to officers and sergeants who describe to me how things have changed in the last sort of few years, where younger officers are now confident to report matters to sergeants who are confident that things will be dealt with, and stuff that may have been ignored 10 years ago is absolutely being dealt with now. So I would hope that if we reran that survey today, officers would have much greater confidence that stuff would happen, and I think that's evidenced by the amount of casework that we're doing and the amount of people that we're exiting.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because then that shows you're doing the right thing. Go back to you then, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. AC Twist, how many forced exits were there in 2025?
So I've got the number for 2024. We had 482 in 2024 compared to 234 in 2022. So we see that it's over doubled in those 2 years. I don't have the number for 2025.
How many of these were people resigning whilst awaiting investigations, outcomes, investigations, etc.?
So a proportion will have been, and actually that's actually not unhelpful. Sometimes even if they resign, we would still go ahead with a hearing to ensure that they got placed on the barred list. But a proportion will have been, and obviously that's a sort of more cost-effective outcome in many ways.
Yeah, but this is my thing about this investigation. Getting people out of the Met who shouldn't be there, I get it, it's an absolute priority. But you've almost made it sound like an accounting exercise, and that makes me think of words like witch hunt, and I'm a little bit worried about that. And is it a good outcome that someone resigns before having an investigation when people sometimes, average waiting is 300 days for a misconduct hearing? So my point is, are people bowing out because of the pressure? Because it'd be great for you to assume that they're bowing out because they didn't want to get caught out, but are they bowing out because of the pressure? Because investigations take so long.
So I think it's a fair comment that the investigations are taking too long, and some of the investment that we touched on is going into increasing the number of hearing chairs, increasing the size of our professional standards team to speed this up. We know that hearings take too long. We also know, candidly, that hearings are a really bureaucratic and legalistic process where it almost feels like you're in court, whereas in any other organisation, a misconduct or a gross misconduct hearing would be held quite simply in fairly short order. Here we end up in sort of full hearings with counsel and other things, and we understand the history of that. I don't know the exact split in terms of how many have resigned because they were guilty and didn't want to be caught out. I suspect that's most of them. And I suspect there may be a very small number who just didn't want to go through it because the amount of time it takes. It's fair to say that also is compounded where we have sort of processes running in parallel. If you have criminal allegations that are investigated by the IOPC, that the misconduct case is paused until the end of that. So you can end up in situations which we all, I think are wholly unacceptable, where officers are in effect under investigation for many years. They tend not to be the corruption or the obvious wrongdoing cases. They tend to be the cases where officers have sort of used force or acted in the execution of their duty that then results in criminal investigation for reasons that we can see. But I think everybody would agree, both complainants, families, officers, everybody would agree that it takes too long, and it would be better in everybody's interest to progress these cases more quickly.
Putting aside the criminal investigations, because I was about to say you're not in charge of them, but in a bizarre way the police are. But can you not prioritise cases like that? Can't something be done especially to get them resolved quickly, because you know they're tacked onto the back of something else which elongates the process?
So in terms of the criminal aspect, that's matter. If it's been taken by the IOPC, that's a matter for them and the Crown Prosecution Service if we end up in that, and then the courts, and we know that there are challenges in that, so that's not one I can answer. In terms of our misconduct process, we've sort of significantly increased the number of hearing chairs and the number of hearings that have taken place, so we can try and sort of move through what was a very significant backlog in terms of hearings and move through that quicker, because we do know that this isn't all on the IOPC for delays. There's also been delays that we build into the system when we're sort of waiting for hearings to be allocated. So increasing the number of hearing chairs by appointing a number of temporary commanders to churn through these more quickly is one of the steps that we've taken.
I accept that, and obviously that's a reasonable response to the situation you find yourself in. But I'm asking you to look at a bit more of a triaged approach to who's had to hang around longer and why. Maybe that can be taken into account when you look at these things. What concerns do you have regarding the Police Federation's assertions that there's an intrinsic link between police officer suicides and misconduct?
So we touched on police officer suicides already, and we touched on the sort of health and well-being survey, and we know that officers are feeling under pressure. They're facing scrutiny, public scrutiny like never before. When I was a constable, you didn't have phones in your face recording every move that you made or every single thing that you said looking to catch you out. Things were easier, and things are much harder today in a sort of polarised environment where the slightest thing can lead to sort of social media outrage or pile-on. So we know that officers are feeling pressured. We also know the amount of work they do and the complexity of that demand is increasing. So every time there's new recommendations, there's a new policy, there's a new thing, that often adds to the burden that officers have to face. And so we do see investigators that are carrying workloads that are too great, and we've looked to reduce that, particularly in areas like public protection, where we've invested over 560 officers, despite shrinking overall, to shift our balance of investment, to reduce the workloads in community safety units, in RASO teams, and we're seeing the fruits of that, where our detection rates are going up, which is welcome. But it does worry me a lot, Lord Bailey, that officer suicide is a thing that we need to discuss. And actually at Chiefs Council, I know we mentioned it before the break, there is a paper going to Chiefs Council this March, which I'll be attending, where we're looking, or Chiefs Council is looking to nationally track this as a phenomenon, and it certainly has our support.
I hope that's good, because we are running something, the Fed and I, to have a look at this. We've been putting papers through Parliament. The Guardian reported that the Met is using software, I can't pronounce the word, Planet, to identify officers potentially committing misconduct by analysing their overtime trends, their sickness patterns. How much money is being spent on this AI software to track officer sickness and overtime patterns and to discover misconduct? I must confess, a little part of me is worried with the word potential. Are we just, is this pre-crime, or what's going on here?
So I think this is what I mentioned a short while ago, the sort of fusion cell and the Enterprise Data Observatory. This is about a preventative model, not a... we want to deal with a thing before it happens. There's often signs where you find officers that end up at hearings for gross misconduct. There may have been previous signs that have been missed, whether it was, excessive overtime, whether it was excessive expenses, whether it was more use of force complaints than the average, whether it was all of these things. And up until now, we've not had a system that can draw all of that together to say, we're actually a sergeant providing some advice and saying, actually, looking at this, there's a bit of a pattern here. Is everything okay? Is anything going on? What can we do? Do we need to provide some management support? Do we need to provide some mentoring? Do we need some extra training? We haven't had that, and so you end up dealing with the consequences. What we're trying to do with the Palantir device and sort of platform is to get upstream of some of this, so we prevent things turning into gross misconduct. We prevent people who may be on a path towards getting themselves into difficulty, and we educate them and help them to steer away from that so we can retain our workforce.
AC Twist and the Deputy Mayor, can you see why officers use the words witch hunt? Can you see why they're concerned? Because one take on what you've just said, AC Twist, would be that we run a system of innocent until proven guilty. And let's be clear, this says to discover misconduct. It doesn't say to support people with their professional development. It doesn't help to say, to uplift them. This would suggest, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you have a piece of software that's looking at people to see their potential for misconduct, and you're going to intervene in the first place. I get from your lofty position that might seem like a good thing to do, but Deputy Mayor, let me ask you a direct question. Do you understand why frontline officers might find this piece of software problematic, bearing in mind that software is often lacks nuance?
Well, I take the point about software lacking nuance, and obviously I strongly feel that every use of technology needs to have a human feedback loop and review of that, and this is a pilot and needs to be evaluated as such. But I think it's important in the context of what we learned post Charing Cross, that we're using data that the Met has to look for warning signs of cliques of bad performance and potential misconduct. I know the Commissioner has spoken in this committee about the work that they need to do to make sure that they're taking proactive approaches in terms of ensuring that the highest standards are found within officers. I think that obviously we looked at issues, for example, around disproportionality, and where one of the hypotheses around the disproportionality and misconduct is that early conversations aren't had because of concerns about counter-allegations, and that has led to a disproportionate amount of non-white officers referred into the system. So there is potential in this to take a preventative approach in where are we seeing things, and have leadership looking at that data and asking those searching questions. Have those conversations been had? What's happening? But I recognise that human element is intrinsic in this.
You focused on the human element, which is important, and you've talked about a trial. I think someone needs to question the use of this at all and what it's about, because in here it says about misconduct. If it had said about, sort of a HR approach, helping people maximise their career and avoid some of the pitfalls and the pressures of being a police officer, that might have been a bit more palatable. But there's a strong element of this that says, guilty until proven innocent, and I hope that isn't the case. You're going to reassure me it isn't, but if you're a frontline officer, I guarantee you that's what that reads like. And I think we might need to come back and look at the outcome of this trial. And also, AC Twist, I'd like to know, imagine this trial throws up a particular individual officer, and then we all decide it's a bad thing. What are you going to do with said officer?
So thank you, Lord Bailey. I mean, I think the first thing I'd always say on this is the information and data is the start of a conversation, not the end, right? Just because somebody has got is flagged because of a number of things doesn't mean they're automatically guilty of misconduct. This is about identifying risk and supporting our people and upholding the highest levels of integrity, which I think everybody is keen that we do. The tool from Palantir will bring together internal data we already hold and allows us to see warning signs more clearly than are currently possible. And actually, evidence will show that things like persistent sickness and usually high overtime can be earlier indicators of deeper issues where people may need support, which aren't of themselves misconduct. So even though it's hinged on, from the brief there is on misconduct, I think this is around culture and behaviour and detecting patterns so we can help people before it gets to the stage of misconduct. and it is a pilot. It's one element of a broader programme to deliver a healthier culture, which again I think all on the committee will support, and to raise standards of behaviour, and to bring greater confidence both for officers within the Met to report if they see wrongdoing, but also the community to know that we're doing something about it and we are getting better, which I strongly believe we are.
Okay, I take your point, and I do understand your HR need to look at your members, but let's hope this is administered in the correct way. One last very small question directed at AC Twist. Is there a backlog of officers awaiting misconduct hearings? If so, where does this backlog currently stand in pure numbers terms and time? If you see what I mean?
So I can provide the exact number as it stands today outside of the meeting, but there are a number of officers that are waiting a not significant number of months waiting misconduct hearings. We've put in more resource, as we've outlined, in terms of hearing chairs to help reduce that. We are doing that, but I'll provide you outside Lord Bailey the exact number of officers that are waiting.
But just for the record, are we talking tens of officers waiting 6 months or hundreds of officers waiting a year?
So I think it's more towards the latter than the former, but okay. I'll give you the exact number.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Garbett.
Thank you. I'd like to express my concerns about the contract with Palantir, but for different reasons. Their links to the supplying Israeli military as well as the ICE operation in the US, and I think it's terrifying that they're extending their reach within the NHS as well as the Met. I think it would be really good for us to get the amount of the contract, and if you plan to use them in any other way. And I would support Lord Bailey's saying that this committee needs to keep a close eye on this, because I think it's a pretty terrifying bit of a company and a bit of kit. My question was about the new public health prevention model. I want to kind of unpick what the word public health means in that context. Obviously, there's wider prevention. Public health is kind of usually much closely linked to kind of health and health outcomes. So I don't know if public health is the right phrase, but yeah, just picking up on what you've said about prevention. And have you got any examples of where those early indicators have helped to reduce the likelihood of misconduct?
Yeah. So I think thank you. I think the reason we talk public health is that it's sort of a prevention model for culture and standards, and what we mean is shifting from reacting after the harm occurs to looking to actively prevent the harm occurring by spotting risks early and intervening before behaviour escalates. And in that sense, the model borrows directly from public health, identifying risk factors, monitoring patterns, targeting early intervention in environments where harm is more likely, and we're applying that same approach to professional standards. That sits alongside the sort of harder edge of the stuff that we're doing around exiting the staff, our anti-corruption capability, our vetting refusal rates. Our enforcement is essential, but enforcement alone isn't going to sort of deliver the positive culture that I think we all want. So I've touched on, I'm not going to repeat the sort of work we're doing on the sort of ecosystem and the data, but I think what's important is early action at a team level where we do see clusters of complaints, welfare concerns, gaps in supervision, behavioural trends, instead of waiting for that serious incident to occur. Getting in and intervening early with our team, which we're hoping to go live by the sort of summer of 2026, is really important, and that's the approach we want to take.
Thank you. Yeah, I know you've picked up on a bit of that, and I'll go back to the chair. I used to work in public health, and I would challenge the use of the term public health there, just because it's about improving health and well-being and looking at kind of the health of a population. So I do see the prevention elements. So I would just challenge the use of that term. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Assistant Commissioner, when will the new Victims' Charter be published, and how will its effectiveness be evaluated?
Thank you, Assemblymember Small-Edwards. I mean, the Victims' Charter is really important. It's significantly focused on delivering better outcomes for victims, and we're doing that in part already with the 1,000 additional arrests we're making a month, the crimes that we're solving at double the rate we were a year ago, and where we are building trust. In terms of the date, I don't have the date in terms of the exact publication date in my brief, but again, I can provide that to you. We have done a significant amount of things, though, and it's worth just touching on a few of them. From the instigation of the Victim Focus Desk, which now handles around 30,000 calls a month, giving people a clear route to information, advice and referrals, and stepping in quickly where things haven't gone well. The MyMet service app, so officers can provide information to victims they're entitled to under the victim's code straight away, and victims can give feedback immediately on their experience. And we've trained 11,000 officers, frontline officers, to better identify exploitation and to challenge victim-blaming language. And this is about culture as much as process, how we speak to victims, how we understand their experience, and we know that this will have an impact on trust and confidence. So, finally, I'll mention that there will work with MOPAC, the CPS, courts, voluntary sector, looking at the whole victim journey, looking at how we reduce unnecessary handoffs and providing a more consistent contact as cases progress. I think one of the challenges that remains is the length of time victims are waiting, though. In that I was a victim of, I don't know, a serious assault or a burglary today, it could be 2030 when I get called to give evidence at court, by which time I've probably moved on with my life. Or I've forgotten some of the important detail, or I just don't want to go back to that sort of horrible moment that I had. So in terms of victims, one of the things that I think is a real challenge at the moment is the length of time it's taking to bring offenders to justice.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could subsequently follow
of course.
Up with the date of when that will be published, that would be fantastic. Deputy Mayor, do you have anything to add in terms of holding the Met to account on how victims are treated?
Yeah, this is a key area that MOPAC pushes the Met on. MOPAC does the victim survey, and we also fund a number of victim support services, so getting insight into that. Some of the things that AC Twist has mentioned in terms of the victim front desk, making sure that there's dedicated teams that are helping with some of the issues identified through the Victims Code of Conduct. But I would say that we're seeing both victim attrition from the wider criminal justice system. You'll know that the independent victim commissioner formerly did a piece of research on victim attrition, and it was up to 70%. So we're very concerned about that, and we're working across the London Criminal Justice Board to look at improvements in that system because of our concerns about that. But I would also say we know that we want to continue to push the Met on victim care, because it is something that we routinely are hearing from those insights that isn't where it should be.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And Assistant Commissioner, when will the Met meet its KPI for completing gross misconduct investigations within 6 months?
So we're not there yet. Compliance has risen from about 18% to around half of all cases for the first time, and extending the new approach to all hearings is expected to deliver further gains. So I don't have a date by when we're going to do it, but we've significantly improved in recent months, and it's now about 50%. But again, the investment that we've made, the money that we've talked about, is going to help bring that down.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
Very briefly, Assistant Commissioner, what impact are accelerated hearings having on the speed at which high-risk officers are being removed from the organisation?
So I think accelerated misconduct hearings are a good way of exiting people quickly. The hearings are much shorter, and the changes in regulations that mean that other officers, in addition to assistant commissioners, sort of chief constables, can hear them, mean that they can be progressed more quickly.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Duval. Assemblymember Lord Duval.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell us what the improvements that have been achieved through the new agreements between the CPS and IOPC, and what bottlenecks still remain?
So, Lord Duval, I think that's probably a question directed better at them. I think the accountability review is clear around, we've been lobbying significantly around the sort of double jeopardy element, where officers are who've been put through a criminal process or a public inquiry, and their evidence has been tested at the at the threshold that they, our view that they shouldn't then be retested at a different threshold unless it's a different point that people are making. I think in terms of timeliness, I'm yet to see that data come through. So I think, without sort of wishing to fudge the answer, I think it's going to have to be a question for the CPS and IOPC.
Okay, all right. Then can you tell us what proportion of cases reviewed by the early fact-finding team that was diverted away from the misconduct system, and how is the Met ensuring that it does not lead to under-escalation?
Bear with me. So our view is that the early fact-finding is intended to improve fairness and proportionality by establishing the basic facts very quickly before deciding whether to launch a formal investigation. So a central team now conducts a time-limited fact check with a 10-day target to support the appropriate authority in deciding the right route, whether that's conduct an investigation, refer to the IOPC, push into grievance, local management, or no further action. Early evidence suggests improved filtering and decision quality. This includes about a 25% reduction in the immediate recording of decisions since launch, with safeguards to avoid use where there's clear criminality or incontrovertible facts require immediate formal investigation. So I think our view is that the 10-day target is really helpful. We can look at it, we can assess CCTV, we can assess body-worn, we can check intelligence systems in that time and then make a better informed decision rather than launching an investigation that then sort of sits for many months when actually we could have decided quite early that either there was or there wasn't a case to answer.
Okay, so but are we reaching the 10 days then? To the 10-day target?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I will come back to you on that.
Okay, so let's go back to the earlier question I asked on terms of that. So we have a set of agreements, but it sounds like, maybe I've misunderstood you, that there's still a bit of a standoff because different organisations, like the CPS, IOPC, would look at it from a different angle from you in terms of once the process you've gone through. I mean, look, the issues of double jeopardy could be a bit of a red herring. We have double jeopardy and, it doesn't exist. I get you. If I'm determined and new evidence comes to light, that's not what these processes are about. So just give us a flavour about what this standoff, if I can describe it as that, it might be too brutal a word, but it sounds like a standoff between organisations of understanding what we need to do, and it may be that the MPS needs to listen rather than these other organisations listen. So help me out here. Yeah. Help me out to understand what these issues are.
So, look, I'd never assume that we're always right in this, and there's competing tension. We can only control what we can control, I think. In terms of the IOPC and CPS at the moment, there's work ongoing, and we know at different points of the accountability review require different things in order to simplify or streamline the process. We've got a really good working relationship with the IOPC, really good, and likewise the CPS. So I definitely don't think there's some sort of organisational standoffs here. I think far from it. I think we work together well. But there is a backlog. These decisions do take time. These decisions take longer than we would want. And if the IOPC are investigating again due to their pressures, these things can take longer than we would want. But I don't think it's fair to say that there's any sort of standoff or sort of dispute. I think we're trying to do the best we can. But I can only comment on what we can control. But I would say that the organisations work together closely.
And just to paint, sorry, not to labour a point, but just to paint a picture about what happens in these times is that officers that have gone through a process have been judged that there's an outcome in the process. If that outcome isn't an exit strategy, they're still in limbo because of these outstanding issues of actions of others, and we can't move forward in integrating, if it's the case of integrating them back into the police service. So it's the productivity issues that are really your concern.
So I think, Lord Duval, that's right, in that if somebody has faced if an officer has faced a criminal trial and been acquitted, but still remains under gross misconduct investigation led by the IOPC, then you are in that limbo, depending on the levels of restrictions that may attract. But clearly in criminal cases or gross misconduct cases, they tend to attract the higher level of restrictions. And getting those hearings in, is really important. So moving quickly to get that hearing done is important, and we've touched on the measures we're taking to try and expedite it our end. And I know the IOPC don't want these things to be dragging on either, so we're trying to do it, but there is a question of sort of demand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts, have you got a 30-second question that gets a 30-second answer?
Possibly. Just on the issue of Palantir, one for the Deputy Mayor, I think. Given the high-profile nature, and could I associate myself with the concerns which are being raised about the use of Palantir software and systems, given the high-profile nature of Palantir and the concerns raised around their behaviour, Deputy Mayor, was the Mayor consulted regarding the use of Palantir as a partner for this processes?
Yes, the Mayor's been updated on the wider. This is a pilot as part of a wider programme, as AC Twist has outlined. Obviously, we were aware of some of the concerns when this contract came forward. It came to our IAM, and I asked about those issues. It obviously went through the standard procurement process, and it is a pilot, and we will be reviewing the decision when that comes forward. As Assembly Member Garbett has mentioned, it is used by MOD and NHS too, although I recognise the concerns.
Yes, I understand that the government has, because of the links with the MOD and the NHS, agreed to publish as much correspondence as possible in relation to the decision to award the contracts to Palantir. Will you commit to the same?
Yeah, where that's available, sure.
Thank you.
This is a pilot, so it will be reviewed. So
it's also a principle, Deputy Mayor.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our guests for attending this morning and for their answers to our often robust questions. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Noted. Can I ask the committee to note the monthly report from MOPAC? Noted. Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from this meeting?
Agreed.
Can I ask the committee to note its work programme 25-26? The next meeting of the committee is scheduled to take place on Wednesday, the 11th of March 2026 in the Chamber at City Hall. I have no urgent business, so that concludes today's meeting on time. Thank you.